Chapter 201, Leash. Mother Justina lowered her head, supporting it with her arms. She closed her eyes and let out a sigh. In the past 3 years, she felt like she had aged 30. When she opened her eyes, she saw a strand of silver hair dangling down, and she let out another sigh as she calmly combed it into place. Mother Justina wasn't exactly young by any means, but it was concerning for her to look as old as she did at her age. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a steaming cup of tea on her desk, and a small smile curled her lips as she glanced at Junie. She was such a sweet girl. In the back of her mind, Justina wished girls like Junie were born into a kinder and gentler world. But alas, that was not to be. The Empress had tried her best to make the world seem good and hopeful. Justina was not nearly so naive. She could see the patterns unfolding. With her position of power, she could see the pieces moving on the board. The ancients return to terror and vie for power. The abrupt end of the Ostians was probably what nailed the coffin shut as far as Justina was concerned. The Naga just butchered them, all of them, as if some invisible hand was removing a pesky, uncooperative pawn. At first, Justina thought there would be relative peace after the end of the war with Avalon. Then the Mugumans arrived, followed by the vampires and the Zarimans. After that, the angels themselves arrived at the Empire. And as for now, the Syndicate has reared their heads, butchering her brothers and sisters in this holy place. The Empress has sent a letter to express her condolences and promising additional security for places of worship. In her benevolence, she has also promised funds to help with the temple repairs. Then Mother Justina heard a knock on the door, and she suppressed another sigh before asking whoever it was to come in. When she looked up, she wearily got to her feet. Once, she would have sprung to her feet at the sight of these two, but now, well, they just meant more headaches and sleepless nights. "You seem tired, Mother Justina," Ariel said as she approached, and Justina just nodded in response. "Yes, having your place of worship attacked, and the faithful under your charge butchered, does tend to wear you down," Justina replied dryly. "Perhaps you should rest," Aruyan said in response to her slight disrespect. "No, there is much to be done, rites to carry out," Justina replied as she tried to center herself. "Rest, you are in no condition to help anyone as it stands. Take a break at least for a few hours. We will return tomorrow. We have other affairs to set in order," Ariel said as the two high angels left without another word. Justina stared at the door for a moment before taking a seat again. "They are right, you know. You should rest. You have been overworking yourself," Junie said hesitantly. "If the work is not done, people suffer, sister. I do not have the luxury," Justina replied as she rubbed her eyes. "At least take a short nap, Mother. You didn't get much sleep the past week," Junie said kindly as she gently rubbed Justina's shoulder. Justina hesitated for a moment before conceding with a nod. "Wake me up in an hour," Justina said before putting her head on the desk. Her eyelids felt like weights were attached to them. She has gotten maybe 2 hours of sleep a day for the past week, and it was finally catching up to her. Justina shut her eyes for a moment and then opened them. She sighed as she shifted her posture, but she got a glimpse of red and gold sitting right in front of her. She sprang up and saw none other than the Empress smiling at her. "If you are hard-pressed for a bed, I can provide funds to get your something," Cecilia said with a smirk. Justina looked at the clock and saw that she has been asleep for 5 hours. As she did so, she noticed the blanket draped over her shoulders. "I'm sorry, Your Grace, Justina began as she desperately tried to blink the sleep from her eyes. "Calm down. I am sure it has been a trying time, but do make sure to take care of your health. You are no good to anyone exhausted," Cecilia said, and Justina nodded. "Take the next 2 days off. I am sure your assistant here should be able to handle things in your stead," Cecilia said, and Justina instinctively shook her head. "No, Sister Junie," Justina began, but Cecilia swiftly cut her off. "Has given me a rather comprehensive update on the situation. She has also given me some good solutions to the current problems," Cecilia said as she cast an approving glance at Junie, who blushed slightly at the praise. "You have a talented attendant, Mother Justina. I would advise using her to further your mutual goals. You don't have to do everything yourself, you know. I myself always aim to recruit those of talent and ability into my service. You yourself is one such example." Cecilia said as she crossed her arms. The church will need you in the days to come. The empire will need you. I expect you to take care of yourself. Get a full night's sleep every now and then. For people in our position, mistakes costs lives, so we cannot make mistakes, Cecilia said, and Mother Justina nodded. Sister Junie, take over Mother Justina's duties for tomorrow. She may return service in a limited capacity the day after, Cecilia said as she stood up. We will have a meeting in a few days. I expect you to be well rested when the time comes, Cecilia said as she turned away. Yes, my Empress, Mother Justina replied with a bow, a hint of fear in her voice. She knew Cecilia was not a kind and gentle woman. She was a conqueror, a woman who could fall asleep on the side of an ancient beast. In the back of her mind, Mother Justina always knew she wasn't a loyal retainer to the Empress. She was a tool, and the moment tools outlive their usefulness, they are discarded. As you command, my Empress. Digam. Cecilia entered her study and smiled up at her friend, who was lounging on his cushion. Legiana was standing nearby in her humanoid form, as if enjoying the peace and quiet. Enjoying your rest? Cecilia asked with a hint of mirth in her voice. Rest? Nah, hell is fun. Sulfur, shit wine, shit people. What's not to love? Her dearest friend replied with a laugh. Cecilia, on her part, let out a little giggle at those words. Right, Legiana? Her friend said as he glanced over at her. As you say, my king, Legiana replied simply. You're no fun, her friend said as he stretched and laid over his cushion like a giant dog. On the topic, things that aren't fun, the angels want a word, Cecilia said, and she saw him deflate like a balloon. I just got back, her friend moaned as he slumped into a limp armored heap. Now he just looked like a pile of pouting gold feathers. Friend, stop being childish, Cecilia said with a laugh. Ugh, her friend moaned before sitting back up and once more looked like the terrifying ancient. So when are they coming? Her friend asked as he plucked a loose feather from his body and flicked it away. In the back of Cecilia's mind, she thought of the mages and bestiarians who scramble for that feather. She was sure her friend never realized this, but whenever any part of his body comes off, everyone worth their salt in the Empire wants it. Cecilia will admit that was probably due to her, since some of her dresses, fans, and hair ornaments use his feathers. The fact that they are so resilient to the elements and their beautiful gold color makes them highly desirable. Not only that, they also prove to be extremely powerful magical reagents. Some alchemists actually use the feathers as tools to test out potions and other toxins. As for the bestiarians, well, some entire papers have been written on her friend's feathers alone. Their unique structure and strength is an entire arena of study. With regards to other parts of his body, like the armor plates he sheds and chipped fragments of his blade, those of course catch the interest of smiths. There is at least one blade that has been forged with the collected scraps of his blades. Apparently, the Iron Hammer Royal Forge was damaged in the forging process, but now the blade sits as a family heirloom for House Ironhammer. Cecilia would usually consider this a greedy insult, but in truth, if she wanted something like that, she was sure her friend would make something far greater than the cobbled-together mess the dwarves made. Soon, I expect, Cecilia said nonchalantly. Sooner than you think, her friend said as he tilted his head. Sure enough, Cecilia heard a knock on the door, and she sighed. Never a moment of peace, it seems. Come in, Cecilia said, and it was a guard telling her the angels are here to see them. Interestingly, the seraphim also wants to speak in private. Tell them to come here, her friend said, and Cecilia turned as she raised a brow at him. Oh, we are going to have an interesting chat, her friend said with a low chuckle. Cecilia waited for a moment, but before the angels arrived, a devotee of all things emerged from the tunnel. Are we really going to play this card now? Cecilia asked as she raised a brow. What better time to? The church will struggle from here on out. The last thing we want is for them get desperate. Better to offer them a lifeline. They won't take it, of course, but it's good to let them know it's an option. A leash is better than noose after all, her friend said with a wide, malicious smile. Cecilia smirked at those words. Yes, the angels would never willingly put on the leash, but as it stands, if they lose the Empire, they are in a lot of trouble. They might even lose everything. They might still claw back success somehow, of course, But why would they take the risk? Her friend will just offer them a safer alternative. My friend will feed them, and in exchange, the Empire is free from their meddling. It won't sit right with the angels, of course, and they will not know that her friend is slowly pushing them to depend more on him. Most think her friend's power is brute force, but those are just charades. His real methods are devious and subtle, like a slow cancer eating at them from within until he is all that remains. Yes, the dangled fruit will give them pause. Let us see how they react, Cecilia said, and she returned to waiting. Soon enough, the two angels entered. Ariel watched her friend warily as she entered. The other one, Aruyan, was more steady in her gaze. You said you wanted to speak, Cecilia stated, and the two angels shifted their wary gazes to her. Yes, these attacks will change things, Ariel began, and her friend just laughed. Your church will fade after this, and you come crawling here with threats, her friend said with a low laugh as he approached. The air changed to one of cold tension. Cecilia saw their fingers twitch as if they were about to reach for their weapons. We offer no threats, Ariel replied in as steady of a voice as she could manage. Oh, yes, you do. Without worshippers, without prayers, the Empire stops being a partner. We become a rival, her friend said as he loomed over the two angels. And then you angels will do what you do best. Then you will break your teeth on us, her friend said, and Cecilia saw Aruyan's gaze harden. Yes, so I suggest you highly encourage the continued piety of your empire. They are just slaves, no? Toys for you to play with. It's a small price to pay to keep your toys. Aruyan replied, and Cecilia raised a brow in response. It seems this warrior lacks the appropriate negotiation skills. Ah, but I have many toys. Like this one, for example, her friend said cheekily as he pointed at the devotee. Cecilia watched her friend closely and saw the barest hint of a widened smile. She shifted her gaze back to the pair of angels and saw them stare at the creature in confusion. Do you know what this is? Her friend said as he gestured to the devotee. No, Aruyan replied. Really? Your friend here never mentioned another power source, her friend said as he grinned. I don't, Aruyan began confused. Ah, secrets among friends, her friend said as he approached. Ariel and Aruyan took a step back. Cecilia could see Aruyan's gaze harden as if preparing for battle. In Ariel's eyes, Cecilia only saw fear, but there was also guilt. Ah, you mortals never change, with all your chest banging on family and trust, and yet you stand here clueless. Your friend here knew, I know she did, but regardless, what do you think this is? Her friend said as he turned away from Aruyan and gazed at the devotee. I don't know, Aruyan muttered in response. Without prayers, my empire is threat to you. So how would I resolve this issue without a war? Her friend prompted. You rekindle the faith, Aruyan replied. Which is exactly why we are here to speak to you. The situation is... Ariel began, but her friend just held up a finger and silenced them. Your answer is right here, her friend said as he gestured to the devotee and gave it a simple command. Pray. Chapter 202. Contingencies. Ariel's heart dropped when she saw that creature drop to its knees and pray. The sheer devotion of its prayers caused a gold halo to appear around it. Ariel could feel the power seeping into her body and strengthening her with each passing moment. It was just like before, but stronger this time. This creature has been improved. Pretty cool, huh? The great beast said with a wicked edge in his voice. You have no intention of rebuilding the church, do you? Aruyan replied icily as she gazed at the devotee. Of course not. Human minds are so unreliable. I think this is a far better solution, the great beast said as he glanced at the praying devotee. More efficient, less prone to unnecessary whining and screaming. Also easily mass-produced, the great beast added. And coincidentally, completely at your control, Ariel replied. Yes, convenient, isn't it? The great beast said as his smile widened. Do you really think we will accept this leash? You offered before. What makes you think we will take it now? Ariel asked, and the great beast just laughed. Not immediately, the great beast replied, and Aruyan narrowed her eyes. Oh, I know you all will wring your hands and debate and take forever to make a decision, so I'll just tell you now, give you some time to process it, the great beast said. Ariel grimaced at those words. This was an insidious move. If it got out of hand, heaven would be eating out of the great beast's hand. This was not something that would stand with the divine council, but war wasn't an option either. If the forces of heaven faced both the Hive and the Syndicate, the situation would be catastrophic. The best option now would be patience. They would build up their strength and take out one enemy at a time. I will relay your offer to the Divine Council and await their decision, Ariel replied. I'm sure you will, but I have one more message for you to deliver, the great beast said. And that is, Aruyan asked, you are not the only one with long knives to stick in backs. I've been doing it far longer than any of you. So I suggest you don't give me a reason to take out those knives, the great beast said, and Ariel swallowed nervously at the threat. Provided you even need a reason, Aruyan replied coldly. Well, all you can do is take a chance, isn't it? The great beast said, and Ariel could only grimace. Is there anything else? Ariel asked. You may continue to strengthen the faith in my empire. If you succeed, then you will have no need for this, Cecilia said as she gestured to the devotee. Best of luck, Cecilia added with a thin smile. Ariel scowled before nodding and turning away. The two angels left the room, minds spinning with what this new revelation means. Things were about to get far more complicated. Although there was opportunity here. If it is revealed that the great beast is actively providing power to the angels, they could use this to pit the great beast against the syndicate. Perhaps we could ask the great beast to provide power, Ariel mused, and Aruyan shot her a look. A lot of power, Ariel said as she turned to look at Aruyan, and her eyes widened slightly in understanding. Perhaps, Aruyan replied. I need to speak to Mother, Ariel said, and Aruyan nodded. Come, I know a place, Aruyan said as she beckoned Ariel to follow. Ariel followed Aruyan down into the palace until they reached a small private garden. Ariel looked around and saw it was a rather beautiful place. It was full of flower beds filled with red roses and, interestingly, wild briars. The atmosphere of the garden seemed both wild and refined. However, Ariel did notice that the wild briars were white rather than their usual pink or red. How did you find this place? Ariel asked as she scanned the suspiciously empty garden. This place looked like it was for 1 or 2 people at most. Furthermore, they had walked past several royal guards who didn't even bat an eye when they walked past. By accident, I took off from one of the windows when I was in a hurry, and I saw it on the way out. I later visited, and the guards had no issues letting us through. He mentioned as long as the garden was not occupied, there was no issue with us using it. Aruyan replied with a shrug. I see, then give me a moment, Ariel said as she took out one of the magical devices she was given. It was this gold device with a constantly spinning center. This was a Watcher artifact. The techniques used to make it were long lost, even to the Seraphim. Or perhaps the Serpahim could never have made it in the first place. The dial in the center started to spin, and soon a black void expanded outwards. Ariel and Aruyan were not in another dimension, and nothing could interfere. Ariel flinched when she saw a large glowing red eye appear at the edge of the black dome they were now inside of. Ariel couldn't help but suppress a thrill of fear when she saw it. Her mother had warned her of this place. They couldn't linger here for too long. They were in the gap between worlds, and apparently there were creatures that lived here. As far as she knew, these creatures have never broken out into what the old records call real space. Apparently, a firstborn once tried to create a door into this gap dimension, and it was swiftly torn to pieces by the other firstborn soon after. If this place held creatures that even the firstborn feared, Ariel had no intention of lingering. She took out another device of similar make and pressed a button on the device. The center started to spin faster and faster as it gave out flashes of blue light. This went on for a few seconds before her mother suddenly appeared in the black dome. But she was not really here. Her body was wispy and translucent. She was just a magical construct being projected by a device she was holding. Daughter, is everything well? I was not expecting a call so soon. Uriel said, a tinge of apprehension in her voice. Mother, I am fine, Ariel said as she raised her hand soothingly. I have some concerning news, Ariel said before beginning to explain the devotee and what she felt when it started to pray. How it was even stronger than before, and how the church was unraveling in the empire. Ariel watched as her mothers grow pale and concerned from her words. Everyone here knew what this means. The great beast was offering salvation in exchange for a leash. This would not be an easy decision to make. Depending on which path they take, it would either save them or damn them. There are contingencies for such possibilities, Uriel said hesitantly as she looked away. Contingencies? Aruyan asked as she took a step forward. Yes, contingencies. The virtues in their wisdom have given us contingencies to handle such events. Uriel replied as she grimaced. May I ask what contingencies are in place? Ariel asked, and Uriel just sighed as she bit her lip. I don't know what the contingencies are. This particular scenario was tasked by the virtues to one individual. Uriel replied with a sigh. My lady, a task given by the virtues to one individual is no small matter. Aruyan said, and Uriel nodded in resignation. Yes, it is. It shows trust. And if it is to one individual, it means they do not trust the input the rest of the council. Uriel replied as she glanced up. The one tasked with this is Silvana. Dig-e-e. Silvana glanced over at Uriel, who finally emerged from her little pocket dimension. She looked disturbed, to say the least. Not good news, I presume, Silvana said as she raised a brow. No, but I suppose one of your pet projects will now be used. Uriel replied wearily. That bad? Mihail asked from his seat next to her in the council chamber. The Divine Council was in another of their pointless meetings when Uriel suddenly got called by the transference device. Silvana was loath to give up some of her toys, but she needed to keep the peace amongst the lesser children of the light. It was not easy masquerading as a seraphim when she was a lightborn. They all had their suspicions, of course. This farce had been going on so long that if they had no suspicions, then heaven would be doomed. But still, Silvana held contempt for these lesser creatures. Resentment was sure to set in after being beset from all sides by imbeciles for millennia, and she was supposed to be the most tolerant of the virtues. Silvana was sure any of the others would have wiped the slate clean long ago. But alas, there just weren't better replacements. Without the firstborn or the watchers, all the species were doomed to atrophy and decay. The old gods were cruel, and they made sure without them, their creations would wither and decay. Silvana glanced up as Uriel began to explain the situation, and she noted how the expressions of the rest of the Divine Council started to darken. This is absurd. Does that creature truly think we would accept his leash? Mihail spat. He looked like he was all but ready to declare war. I think we should take the leash, Silvana said, and all the heads turned to face her. Or at least make the great beast think we are taking the leash. I have contingencies, if you recall. Silvana added, and are you confident your measures can address the problem? Mihail asked, and Silvana nodded. We will need to take his leash first and fill our power stores. This means we should request for more than we lose, much more. So if the great beast ever tries to cut the power, we have plenty of power to fight for an extended period. Silvana replied. How long is an extended period? Mihail asked. As it stands at full capacity, I can store enough for centuries of use. Silvana stated, and there was stunned silence across the chamber. Why didn't you bring this up sooner? Gabriella, the Archangel of Diligence, asked. The process is expensive, and I do not have infinite supply of resources. Silvana replied with a shrug. Resources? Uriel asked with a slight bit of unease in her voice. You think the great beast was the only one that thought to use condemned criminals for something useful rather than just executing them? Silvana replied as she raised a brow. Instantly the chamber went silent with heavy silence. That's not acceptable, Uriel snapped. There is a reason the virtues assigned this task to me and me alone. You think all of you are the guard against the return of the ancients. You are correct in this assumption. So let me ask you, who do you think the virtues assigned the task of handling the situation when they do eventually return? Silvana replied coldly. I am the final line of defense. There is a reason the virtues tasked me, and not any of you, Silvana said as a scroll appeared in a flash of light in her hands. This is a mandate of authority from the virtues. If I deem it necessary, I may assume control of the Divine Council and outrank all of you, Silvana said, and the chamber paused in tense silence. Sylvana let the silence sit for a moment before making the scroll disappear again in a flash of light. But that time is not here yet. So for now, I will continue to participate as equals. However, remember this well. If the time comes, I will enact these emergency powers with the blessing of the 7 virtues, Sylvana said, and the other members looked away in unease. Now then, are we agreed? We negotiate for an excess of power with the great beast in exchange for his leash. No drawn-out debate. We cannot afford it now. Sylvana stated, but again silence. I wish to see what your contingency actually is before I make a decision, Uriel said, and the rest of the council nodded agreement. Sylvana just nodded as she stood up. Before you see it, you should remember something. There was a time before this council, a time where power was for its own sake. There were no lines of morality to cross. It was just survive or die. All of you are about to see a relic of that world, Sylvana stated, and she watched as the rest of the council slowly got their feet. Sylvana led the way as the council fell in behind her. She led them to one of the nearby teleportation arrays and keyed in a code only she knew. She was the only free soul that knew the code. Her entire research facility was manned by automated constructs as well as some other assistants. When Sylvana arrived, she was immediately greeted by her loyal servants. A mechanical golem approached as it knelt in front of Sylvana. "Greetings, mistress," the golem said in a voice that sounded like it was vaguely in pain. "What is this thing?" Mihail asked as he peered at the golem. "A criminal, a murderer, and a rapist. He now serves as my assistant. Worthless in life, useful in death," Sylvana stated coldly as the golem visibly trembled as Sylvana's cold gaze. "What?" Uriel sputtered. "What, you think I was just executing all the criminals you give me? The virtues demanded secrecy for when I researched the darker realms of magic," Sylvana said as she pressed a button on the golem's metal body and the chassis opened, revealing the mutilated torso of an angel. The entire Divine Council balked at the sight. Sylvana raised a brow as she saw Mihail's fist clench in rage. He reached for his sword, and in a flash it was out of its scabbard. Sylvana smirked as she pulled out the scroll again, and Mihail faltered as he gazed at the proof of the virtue's sanction. "Rage all you want, Mihail. Bottom line is the virtues trusted me, and only me, with this task. None of you would have been able to carry it out. The virtues chose wisely," Sylvana said, and the rest of the Divine Council just looked darkly at her. You do not approve, but that is to be expected. Shall I show you what exactly my task was?" Sylvana asked, and the Divine Council just looked at each other for a moment before slowly nodding. "Follow me," Sylvana said as she began walking. She walked past many of her other projects, but they were of course not the topic of discussion today. "What is behind those doors?" Uriel asked warily. "You will know when the virtues decide you should know," Sylvana replied. "Or perhaps when you decide we should know," Mihail challenged. "That is true for some of them, but not all. I do not have the right to tell you what is behind some of these doors," Sylvana said as she rounded a corner and finally reached the destination. Sylvana stood before the gold door as she reached out a hand. She casted a silent spell that gave the codes to the door. The runes on the gold surface roared to life as they turned and shifted before opening and revealing a massive chamber. Sylvana walked through the doorway and gazed fondly at the hundreds of thousands of metal pods housing her living batteries. "Impressive, no?" Sylvana asked as she turned around to face the pale-faced Divine Council. "Living batteries, with some augmentations, each can hold a significant amount of power. But unfortunately, it's one charge only. I use their life force as a catalyst to store the power. So once filled, they will die when they are drained," Sylvana said. "How many?" Uriel muttered in mute horror. As if on cue, another of her servants approached and answered the question. "Current count lies at 656,732. At full capacity, power reserves are able to last approximately 3 centuries. Chapter 203, Same Rules for All." Malagaros skittered towards his latest creation. He poked and prodded at the slightly squirming creature, breaking bones, cutting tendons, and ripping flesh just to see how the body had formed. All the while, he monitored the creature's mind state through the vivisection. He didn't like what he was seeing in this one's mind. He could sense resentment for its current predicament. Resentment was not a permitted emotion towards a superior in the hierarchy. A failure, then, Malagaros said as he stabbed a claw deep into the creature's insides. There was a gnashing of teeth from the creature before him. There was a wave of disgust from the other minds within the hive mind as they realized what was happening. Traitor, blasphemer, heretic, rogue, rebel. The insults and curses were thrown at the creature as it writhed against its restraints. The resentment turned to rage, but the tendrils holding it down tightened. Disappointing, Malagaros said as he backed away from the creature. He had learned all he could, but it seemed his skill was far from sufficient. Malagaros gave a mental command, and the surrounding creatures pounced. The rebel was swiftly torn to pieces. Malagaros gazed apathetically at the creature as it was torn limb from limb before its flesh was dragged away to digestion vats. Still not good enough, Malagaros clicked his mandibles in frustration. His king has tasked him with creating something about as independently intelligent as a human, but still absolutely loyal to the hive. Malagaros assumed with the king's new abilities this would be easier since the hive mind had grown stronger. But it always re-enters the same problem. With intelligence comes independence. Independence means potential for rebellion. Rebellion is an unacceptable possibility. The hive is one mind with one vision. Malagaros knew it was certainly possible. Legiana and Nafas were living examples of that it was possible. But thus far only his king has managed to do it, the sheer ease with which he managed to strike that delicate balance. Legiana was the most independent of the members of Hive, so independent she was able to stand in for the king. However, Malagaros knew without a doubt she was easily the most loyal of the members of the Hive. She treated the king's words as divine mandate. As far as she was concerned, his will is the law. There is nothing she wouldn't do to accomplish his goals. He let out another annoyed huff as he turned to the gestation chamber and started again. He spun the essence, formed flesh and forged bone. Flesh crafting was a delicate art. The body affected the mind and vice versa. If anything is out of balance, there will be consequences. Hyperaggression, laziness, dulled minds, and unchecked ambition were just some of the problems. Malagaros grimaced as he worked. He worked and worked. The past one was iteration 1582 of this particular project. He had no idea why his king was so intent on him succeeding in this task. Legiana had her own project, as did Nafas. Malagaros could see the parallels between project. They were working towards the creation of a single entity. He knew not everything created would be used. Chances are his king would merely use all their findings to create his magnum opus. He had no idea what that project was. All he knew was that it must be very important, and he had a nagging suspicion that it has something to do with that human empress. A free mind is rebellious one. Degger. Legiana quietly worked in her lab as she plucked and pulled at the dummy brain in front of her. It was a modified human brain of the female variant. There were minor differences to the two, with most difference having to do with the type of hormones that are more prevalent. Sexual dimorphism for intelligence is non-existent with mere variation of respective affinities for certain emotions. However, the differences were minimal and of little concern when dealing with the average human on the street. The only problem was, Legiana was not just working with the end goal of creating just a normal human. She was creating something for her king's favorite human. Project Lazarus was an ambitious project. Legiana didn't even know if it would be successful. Judging by all the tests and failed attempts, the king wasn't so sure either, but he was certainly adamant in his decision to attempt it. However, the project does yield results that are quite applicable in other areas. This was probably why her king has Malagaros and Nafas working on it as well, although the other two seem none the wiser of his true intentions. Only Legiana and Azatharin seemed to be privy to this part of her king's grand design. The Briars were the fruit of this project. Their high-level link to the hive mind was only possible due to Project Lazarus's mind transference adaptation. Now, all the major minds within the hive have backup bodies on standby, thus ensuring the hive against its leadership being decapitated. Other benefits include improved ether circuitry, better flight abilities, better ether pools, and of course the twin-core synchronization. It was no small feat to create creatures that could take on syndicate elites and seraphim inquisitors on equal ground. Yet her king had managed to do so without resorting to massive monsters that got by on raw power rather than finesse. Maligaros had created some monstrosities, of course, but a more elegant design was needed as well, hence the briars. Legiana plucked and pulled at the brain, injecting stimulants and depressants to see how it reacted. She was closely monitoring its mind through the hive mind as she did so. She noted that achieving the stable equilibrium found in humanoids was difficult. The aeons of decayed atrophy have ruined any sense of intelligent design among humans. There was nothing standard about them anymore. Their variances were more significant than anything sexual dimorphism manifested. It was a complete and utter mess when one peered into the human essence code. Lots of tangled mistakes created from random mutation with little semblance of intelligent design. Yet some of that intelligence was there. Legiana extracted the code from the brain and scanned it again. Her mind probed into the hive mind and recovered the database of recorded human essence codes. Again she saw them, the markers left by the watchers within the humanoids. It was there across all the humanoids. But still these were buried deep within. The rest of the code has atrophied due to an intentional lack of anchoring. The humanoids were designed to decay. They were designed to wither and fade. This little problem meant what she was trying to do was extremely difficult. She moved towards another specimen and started to making some slight modification. The brain in front of her twitched as the woman it was attached to spasmed. Legiana glanced down at the woman as she croaked and groaned, regaining some sense of lucidity. More sedatives, Legiana commanded into the hive mind, and more was injected into her through the tubes connected to her back. "We can't have you waking up just yet," Legiana mused as she gazed at the struggling woman. The woman's body belonged to someone who decided to murder her husband when she found out he was having an affair. The husband was of healthy and fit stock. He was a stone mason and so had useful skills. His life, his body, and his skills were not hers to take, so, as just punishment, she was to be repurposed to pay her debt. Right now, she was testing the cocktail of stimulants she had devised in the dummy brain. It would be interesting to see how she reacts once she regains lucidity. "You really are a fool," Legiana said as she turned to the enchanted capsule that held the woman's soul. "And as for you, was all that gold really worth it?" Legiana mused as she stared down at the body that held the soul of another woman who poisoned her husband to receive his assets. This task was proving difficult. Transporting a soul into another body was causing some inconvenient side effects. The soul would not take well to the new body. The differing physiology causes confusion, hence the need for chemical corrections to the brain. Legiana has a potential solution to this issue, but it involves creating what is in her mind a pure body. Her experiments have yielded that a body free of the errors born of random mutations, yet still distinctly human, would be the most suitable candidate. Once the first transition was completed, she can slowly transfer the soul to a more powerful body. In essence, she needed to give soul time to acclimatize to a body that is superior to the flawed original. However, with regards to Cecilia, there was a much larger problem she was picking at. She was an heir of firstborn, which means she has a flexible ether core. This was not easily replicated, but on that front her king said he would handle that problem. Legiana would trust him as she always does. With that, she finished her work on this particular experiment and ordered her test subject to be awakened. The woman instantly screamed, and when unshackled she started screaming about how this body was wrong and how her limbs didn't belong to her. She started clawing at her face and limbs, her nails dragged deep gashes into her flesh as she seemingly tried to tear herself to pieces. Legiana calmly watched as the woman flailed. All the while she observed the woman's mental state through the parasite Legiana had infected her with. Her mind was rejecting her new body, the exact same outcome of all the previous experiments. Although this one hasn't gone to the point of suicide yet. Legiana nodded at a nearby creature and it handed her a Foci pistol. In the meantime, Legiana injected the knowledge of what the pistol does to her. Perhaps with a way out, she might just override her survival instincts. The woman gazed at the pistol horror as she moved away, her instinct for self-preservation still holding strong. Log improvement, success number 17 for initial retention of self-preservation, Legaina said into the hive mind, and an assistant logged it into the database. Legiana gave the hive mind the command to start injecting adrenaline into the woman to see how she responds to stress. At the same time, one of her servants approached, weapons raised as a threat. Now it was time to see if she would fight for her life. The woman screamed as she picked up the pistol and started firing at the adjutant. The bolts just bounced off, and the woman, seeing this, panicked and tried to run. She was then swiftly restrained and knocked out. "Excellent," Legiana said with a smile as they dragged the unconscious woman back to the holding pods. Log success 17 of preliminary tests. Dig. Sylvana watched calmly as the Divine Council walked around in mute horror. She couldn't help but roll her eyes at their reactions. They truly were the coddled children. During the war with the Firstborn, the Seraphim were used as common soldiers, but many of Heaven's best weapons were made by the Lightborn. Sylvana, being one herself, has watched with disdain at how the Seraphim foolishly bumble their way through managing the realms. Her mind wandered to the legion of Lightborn, still locked in stasis in the room next door. Sylvana let out a small sigh at the thought. Despite the fact that the Lightborn did not age, their bodies would still atrophy without constant warfare. They were adapted to a world of violence and war. The Virtues knew this, so they elected for this solution. It was better to conserve their strength rather than expend it needlessly. So thus, the Virtues and Sylvana stayed behind as the rest entered their deep sleep. There were just 10,000 Lightborn left, and there was no way to repopulate without intervention from either a Firstborn or the Watchers. Unfortunately, both are dead and extinct, which means Sylvana, a race, was doomed to wither into nothing. Sylvana rarely left the palace because the last thing she wanted to see was the cherubim, with their weak bodies and stunted wings. They were disgusting, aberrant creatures. When she was a child, if something like a cherubim was ever spawned, it would be thrown from the tallest spire in heaven. As for the wretch that bred such a creature, their wings would have been cut off, and they, Thesmelves, would then be thrown off the same spire. Sylvana noted Uriel's horror as she saw the tubes embedded in the body of one particular seraphim. Sylvana walked over and peered into this capsule and saw that this one was a young girl. The murderer killed her 3 siblings in blood-fueled rage, I believe, Sylvana said dispassionately. She's a child, Uriel spat back. Who was sentenced to death? I just made sure she could still be useful. Sylvana replied coldly, I suggest you get accustomed to this archangel. I see the sprouts of another war growing at the feet of the great beast. Heaven will burn unless we are prepared to meet whatever the ancients have in store, Sylvana said coldly. Are we not better than this? Uriel asked as she looked up at massive chamber. The pods gleamed with an ominous light, their macabre cargo held in place for who knows how long. Sylvana just sighed as she pinched the bridge of her nose. This was to be expected. To an extent, the Virtues chose this bunch of bleeding hearts to help give Heaven a pretty nice demeanor, to make them seem more palatable to the lesser creatures. So the Virtues decided on making this new testament of sorts, a new set of commandments to guide the sheep in a more gentle world. Of course, that means they would invariably forget the horrors of the old world. But even the old soldiers were not fully privy to the true depths of preparation the Lightborn had to conduct in order to achieve victory. You do not kill a god, let alone gods, by playing nice or fighting fair. One just needed to seriously ponder it for a moment to realize it. The demons are terrible, ruthless creatures, and yet they play second fiddle to forces of heaven. No one has ever won a war and achieved peace using bleeding hearts and moral indignation. Peace is won with war, safety is won through violence. In the back of her mind, the new teachings the Virtues bestowed may not have been such a good idea. Sylvana protested at the time, but she was overruled. So hence, she decided to join the Divine Council. No one knew who she was. The official story was that she was a rare breed of seraphim that held close relations to the Lightborn, and that throughout the war she was a researcher. This was mostly true since she was a researcher for the conflict. In fact, she was the foremost expert in anti-hive countermeasures. No, we are not better. What does that even mean? That we are too soft to fight? That we won't use the tools presented to us? Sylvana replied in exasperation, the frustration of 10,000 years bubbling up to the surface. You all might follow the drip-fed bullshit the virtues have been feeding you. In fact, you all follow it quite well. You all are excellent shepherds. You guard the herd, cull it when it needs culling, remove the more insignificant threats. But the moment something dangerous comes along, well, that is the moment you can no longer remain shepherds, Sylvana said as she stalked towards Uriel. Though Sylvana was a head shorter than Uriel, she still took a steady step back. Sylvana's gaze was cold and merciless. Uriel was just a soldier in the war. She had no idea what it really took to win it. I don't have time for your tender sensibilities, and honestly, neither does heaven. So I would suggest you cut all this savior complex nonsense. There is only one thing you need to know about me, Archangel, Sylvana said as she stopped and held out her arms. Her wings flared out and shone with an ethereal white light that caused all the nearby servants to shriek in terror. Uriel looked around and saw the trembling bodies of the servants, all of them chained within their moving coffins. Their souls are terrified, but their bodies are unable to disobey and flee. I follow the Old Testament. Chapter 204, Innovation and Evolution. I stared at the pod that held the fruits of my labor these past few months. It was still far from perfect as far as backup bodies go. But as it stands, it would do for now. If something happened to Cecilia, her mind would be preserved in this body. Eventually, I would make immortal bodies for other useful individuals. Montis and Sarana come to mind with regards to useful specimens. Audius was already immortal, so he didn't need it urgently, but I suppose some improvements wouldn't hurt. He certainly seems eager for it. But I, for one, am the type of primordial monster that prefers to kill two birds with one boulder. The sovereign path of my evolution creates some interesting possibilities. The hives need the queens. That has always been the case. That's actually what I thought was the best method. All the hives use it, so I assumed it was just the most optimized way. I all but confirmed this when I tried alternative methods, but that was before I headed down the sovereign path of my evolution. There was still merit in the brood organization method, but it did lack flexibility. The method of using broods meant the broods had to specialize, and they lacked dynamic adaptability. For example, a brood focused on providing logistical support would take some time to convert to a combat-based brood. But now, with my new adaptations, I can create more creatures like Legiana. The reason I never made any more before this was that too many cooks spoiled the broth. The level of intelligence would necessitate a degree of independence. That was previously not possible unless that individual was of a high caste within the hive. If I were to create more capable and adaptive specialized units, they must be willing to be commanded by less intelligent and independent units. If not, all I would have created was a bunch of wild cards that routinely disobey commands. And this was due to the fact that the queens are specialized command units, despite not being as intelligent as the specialized unit in terms of raw cognitive capacity. The queens were always the most competent commanders since they were specifically designed to be competent in command. This whole conundrum means that the Briars basically would only listen to me, Legiana, Nafas, and Malagaros. If I didn't have to keep this flexibility for switching commanders, I could actually make the Briars even smarter, but there was little point if they were only capable of being my personal bodyguards. Oh, but now, with one mind, one vision, I can make individuals significantly powerful while maintaining loyalty and compliance to the chain of command. Working on Cecilia's spare body has managed to learn quite a few things about how to create individuals who are part of the hive yet independent actors. A great change is coming to my hive. I might even hear debates ring out in the hive's mind as the different perspectives seek consensus. With the speed that the hive can communicate, having differing opinions across the hive carry weight and come to a shared conclusion would greatly improve the hive's intelligence. I could already sense some of it happening with the queens. They now debate and offer their opinions, rather than bending over backwards when Nafas gives a command. They still obey, but they offer input and feedback, which to Nafas's credit, she takes and improves upon her existing plan. I shifted my gaze from Cecilia's spare body and moved towards my latest creation. I asked Cecilia for the name, of course. She was always better at it than me, running shooting dogs and all that. I have my moments of good names, but they are rare, like Legiana and Gurgle. On cue, my favorite bloated beetle approached demanding pokes, and I, of course, gave him a little poke. His gelatinous body jiggled from the prod, and Gurgle let out a happy gurgle before waddling away into his favorite corner. Never thought I would ever have a pet, but I do enjoy Gurgle and his gurgling. I sent a simple mental command, and the prototype before me woke up. The figure shifted within the holding chamber as the carapace wall opened with a crack. The figure stumbled out on its two wobbly legs. It took a moment to steady itself. It was similar in design to Legiana, but I decided to shift the design more towards an infiltrator role. It was supposed to be able to walk easily in broad daylight. I actually got this idea partly from how Surchax operates. Sirens are distinctly separate from most humanoid species, but their form is also alluring to almost all humanoid species. They make do by having a passive illusionary effect on their appearance that slightly twists their appearance to suit the viewer's tastes. I decided to go with a similar concept. This one had your typical female silhouette. Your slender hourglass figure, thin waist, wide hips, large bust, etc., blah blah blah. However, I made some fine adjustments to it. They looked like they were wearing a dress, but it was actually a type of second skin that can morph into varying types of clothing. So it can be a sultry dress, a tasteful cocktail dress, work clothes, and of course fucking armor. Her hair looked like a long mane of silver hair, but it was actually a type of silk that could harden into a helmet or even a hood. I did a little trick with her by putting a sensor dome under her hair, and when the hair hardened into a defensive shell, it wouldn't affect sight. Her actual face was modeled after some of the most popular courtesans and prettiest noble ladies. Her eyes didn't actually help her see. They were special organs that allowed her to charm those she was looking at. They also helped to cast a simple illusion over the face, like the sirens do to twist their appearance to the viewer's taste. It also acts as a red herring, as those trying to blind her would find little success. Her skin is made to be soft or supple, but in the event of combat, it can harden into a type of material closer to wyvern leather than human skin. Naturally, she came with a pair of synchronized ether cores and a very sophisticated brain. The shackles on her were loose, so she was far more independent than most hive creatures. For now, I plan to drop her in under Legiana to see how she does. She blinked for a moment, her facial expression the perfect example of pure innocence. Her eyes looked around the room with practiced ease as she manipulated them in a perfect imitation of humanoid eyes. Her eyes glowed with the ethereal blue light as she scanned the room. Her large, beautiful eyes glowed like sapphires as she locked her eyes on me. A radiant smile that I was sure would melt even the strongest of humanoid hearts blossomed across her face. She trotted up to me and gave me a graceful curtsy, her every action the example of feminine grace. Her beauty was there to ensnare, and her innocent demeanor was to invoke a protective instinct in those who viewed her. "Hello, my king," she said, her voice high, cute and childlike. "Oh, she is going to do very well. I plan to have her masquerade as the newest member of the Faith of Unity. With someone like her roaming the streets, the people will ditch the Church of the Sacred Order in droves. This one is going to sing and charm her way into the hearts of the populace." Cecilia suggested the name Fayetta, and I think it will work just fine. Those thirsty little shits won't stand a chance. Dig-ake. Regari grimaced as he felt his sword get knocked out of his hand for the 20th time in the last 2 hours. He let out a small groan as he shook his hand. The constant strikes has left his palm bloodied and his arm numb. "Are you sure you can't just heal me?" Regari grumbled as he walked over to pick up his sword. Regari glanced over at Mihaela, who was just giving him a bemused smile as she held her rapier in a relaxed grip. "Your enemies aren't going to care that your hand hurts, kid. Some fights go on for hours. If you can't keep up, there is a good chance you are going to end up dead," Mihaela said as she lightly twirled her rapier, her demeanor showing that she felt no fatigue at all. "What was the longest fight you ever had?" Regari asked, and that gave Mihaela a moment of pause as she considered the question. 11 days, I believe. It was a long duel. I came out on top for that one," Mihaela replied. "Who were you fighting?" Regari asked as he readied his stance. "An archangel. I left him a scar on his face, so he would always remember he lost," Mihaela said as she flashed a savage smile. Regari was briefly stunned at those words. He was about to ask which archangel, but he saw Mahaila launch herself at him. In a panic, he tried to parry the incoming strike, but instead he felt his sword get batted out of his hand. Pay attention, most duels aren't honorable things. Sneak attacks are par for the course in battles to the death, Mahaila said as Regari gulped from the blade being held at his throat. Now pick up your sword, we go again, Mahaila said, and Regari nodded mutely. The rest of the day went more or less like this. It's been a week since the great beast left, and the hive was still at work tearing this world to pieces. The members of the new hive were now everywhere, much to the distress of most of the people in the town. The fact that the hive was harvesting their fellow limbo demons was common knowledge at this point. So terror was the word of the day. They were terrified of them, and for good reason. These creatures were ruthless and apathetic killing machines. On a few occasions, he has seen giant gelatinous beetles walking around with translucent bellies that showed off their macabre cargo. Regari grimaced as he readied his sword, and he took a deep breath as he analyzed Mahaila's stance. He knew it was pointless. Mahaila could feint as naturally as he could walk. Her strikes were like snakes, coiling around his guard, and whenever his sword clashed with hers, one of two things happened. The first being his sword would somehow be deflected in a way that would almost toss it out of his hand. The second was that it would feel like he swung his sword at a granite boulder. Somehow when his sword met hers in a lock, her blade wouldn't even budge. The difference in strength was startling to say the least. Regari thrust with his blade, and Mahaila calmly batted it aside. Most fights Mahaila barely had to move. She could just stand still and parry all his strikes like they were nothing. He jabbed and lunged, and all he got for his effort was the stinging pain in his hand as Mahaila gave him a static block that sent vibrations traveling up his arm. He coiled his sword back and got ready to launch a feinting stab, but Mahaila's form just vanished. Regari hesitated for a moment, but then he felt ice crawl up his spine. He turned around just in time to raise his sword. Mahaila's blade came down like a hammer, and he felt his guard shatter like porcelain. His eyes widened as her blade came down right towards his shoulder. He felt the blade strike his shoulder. He let out a howl of pain as he felt his shoulder blade shatter from the force. The armor Mahaila had loaned him had stopped the edge, but it didn't stop enough of the force. Regari grit his teeth as he collapsed on the grey soil as he gasped for breath. He couldn't move his left arm, and the blow had knocked the wind right out of him. Now then, on to the next lesson, Mahaila said, her tone a tad grimmer than before. That wasn't the lesson. Regari sputtered through his groans as he laid on the grey soil. You are not a normal demon kid, Mahaila stated as she gazed down at him. Regari gazed dumbfounded at Mahaila as she glared down at him. He had no idea what she was talking about. What the hell was a normal demon anyway? Was there even such a thing as a normal demon? Half of the demons were psychopathic murderers, and the other half were psychopathic cannibals. You ever notice you need less food than your little sister? Mahaila asked, and that got Regari listening. Ever heard of this thing called an heir of the firstborn? Mahaila asked as she raised a brow. No, Regari groaned. Ever feel like no matter what you eat, there is always this hunger inside of you? Like this thing at the back of your mind gnawing away? Mahaila pressed, and this got Regari thinking. In fact, yes, there was this odd hunger. Regari was never well fed by any stretch of the imagination, but now he could eat as much as he wanted. His belly was full, but this hunger still remained. At first he thought that hunger was from lack of food, but now he knows it's obviously not. What are you talking about? Regari groaned as he sat up. Stand up, this is our next lesson, Mahaila said, and Regari wanted to protest at first, but he saw the look in her eyes. Regari grimaced and grit his teeth as he struggled to his feet. Each movement sent a sharp pain through his body as his shattered shoulder screamed in protest. If you want to protect your little sister, you better be able to fight with missing limbs, Mahaila said, and Regari let out a groan before finally steadying himself. Now follow me, Mahaila said, and Regari grit his teeth before following after her. He followed her for at least half an hour, the pain causing him to break into cold sweat. He finally staggered into this odd room in the middle of town. As he walked in, he noticed that there was no other limbo demons around the building. In fact, a few of the limbo demons seemed to be quite terrified of what was inside the chamber. He saw there was a limbo demon chained in the middle of the chamber, and a pair of hive soldiers were guarding her. She was struggling in the chains, her eyes wide in fear. Now then, I'm going to tell you something very important about being an heir of the firstborn. The firstborn are what most know as the Devourers, or the old gods, Mihaela said, and Regari glazed at her in surprise. We are heirs because we share a piece of their power. Some say it's a leftover legacy since the old gods created our distant ancestors. They operated under one rule: strength is taken from the weak. Consume, adapt, overcome, Mihaela said as Regari and Mihaela looked down at the struggling demon. As an heir, you will be able to devour the essence of any living creature, provided it is sufficiently weaker than you, or if it has been sufficiently weakened by you. As for this one, it was difficult to find something weak enough considering most weaklings die quite easily, Mihaela said as she gazed down at the trembling demon. Now can you feel that hunger? The injury you have should make it worse. Dig into the feeling, that hunger, and look at your prey. Mihaela said, and Regari just looked at Mihaela incredulously. What, do you want me to eat her soul or something? Regari sputtered in response. No, you will be eating a lot more than that. A creature's essence is everything they are, its power, its soul, its hopes and dreams. It is everything they are, hence the name. Mihaela said nonchalantly. It is the key to how heirs like us get our powers. It also provides immortality, since it revitalizes our bodies. Mihaela explained. So now focus on the hunger and let your instincts do the rest, Mihaela said as she glanced down in disdain at the limbo demon. Don't let the pathetic sight fool you. This one killed her children to save her own skin. Then she sold her soul to get out of the execution, Mihaela added as she ground her teeth. Regari sighed in resignation. To be honest, he really didn't care much for the limbo demon. Limbo demons were the lowest of the low. In the Wrath Ring, calling someone a limbo worm was an insult that would often cause a fight. He focused on the hunger, and he felt something, like he had a pair of fangs in the depths of his soul, and they were aching to sink into a soft prey. Then the limbo demon screamed, and Regari was snapped out of it. The feeling faded, and he got a good look at the trembling, weeping demon. She was terrified beyond belief, and he looked down and saw his body glowing with this ethereal blue light. His fingers were tipped with these blue claws, and even as he gazed at the claws, he felt a sense of unease. Get on with it. Focus and devour. Injuries tend to exacerbate the hunger. I can always chop off one of your hands for motivation, Mihaela said dryly. Regari felt a chill go up his spine. Mihaela was always gentle with his sister, but he did notice she was a lot tougher on him. Surchax called it tough love, but Regari wasn't sure what that meant. Well, her love now involves threatening to chop one of his hands off if he doesn't get a grip. So calling it tough wasn't that much of a stretch. Regari focused again and tried to ignore the pain in his shattered shoulder. Feel the hunger. Feel your fangs. Power is not given, it is taken. Mihaela barked, and Regari felt something roar to life inside him. He heard this howling around him like a wild beast had awakened. His gaze locked onto the limbo demon who was staring at him in terror, but instead of that vague pity, he felt only contempt for her weakness. Yes, hold on to that. Now what do you feel? Mihaela said, and Regari felt a dribble of drool trickle down his chin. Hunger, Regari growled. Good, Mihaela replied. Now feast. Chapter 205, Claws of the Ancients. Mihaela glanced down at Regari as he pounced at the limbo demon. His ethereal fangs and claws lashed out. The demon screamed as he ripped the essence from her body. With each bite and slash, the demon's body started to wither and disintegrate. Each gouge tore strips off this pale blue aura from her body. Yet her physical body was unharmed. Instead, the body just aged years in seconds. Mihaela glanced at the strips of her essence just falling away and fading into motes of light. So it seems she has a messy eater on her hands. As far as she remembered, she hadn't done much better herself. That hunger was hard to control once it got going. There is a reason a battle to the death between heirs usually ends up as just a feral brawl. The firstborn, as always, give nothing for free, with every blessing a curse. It grants power, but you also tap into what Mihaela could only imagine is the hunger that drives the firstborn. Most undiscovered heirs just end up going mad with hunger and are quickly hunted down. Heirs have always been a persecuted group. Previously, the Watchers would hunt down the heirs, but some were permitted to exist. Mihaela, her master, and some of her master's old crew were some examples. An heir in control of their hunger was a powerful existence. The Empress had an unusual amount of control over that hunger, but judging by how intelligent she was, it was of little wonder that she could handle it well. It was apparent that Regari would need a lot of work to master control over the hunger. His life of hunger had affected him rather dramatically. Just by looking at him now, he looked like a ravenous beast as he tore into the demon. Messy eaters were problematic, since the ability of heirs to absorb essence was already weak. From what she has gathered, even the most particular and clean of eaters only could absorb about 20% of the essence. Naturally, this was in sharp contrast to the firstborn, who had perfect absorption. Judging by what she was seeing, Regari here was just getting about 5% of that idiot's essence. Once Regari finished eating, he doubled over and groaned. Mihaela watched as his body shifted and changed. His muscles hardened, and he visibly grew an inch or two. "How do you feel?" Mihaela asked, as the ethereal beast within him faded away. It was interesting that he had claws, while Mihaela's own inner beast only had a pair of sharp fangs. Her master had fangs, but he also had a pair of cloven hooves that he would use to stomp his prey into submission. "Strong," Regari said as he flexed his arms, his wounds, his pain all but gone. "This is the power of essence, the very thing that made the old gods, gods. We only tap into a small portion of it, and there is a limit to which we can grow. I will teach you to wield this power, but beware that hunger. You can lose yourself in it," Mihaela said as Regari struggled to his feet. He clutched his stomach and grimaced. "It felt good," Regari muttered. "That's an understatement. It's addictive. Many have lost themselves to it and just become feral beasts. Remember, this is not a blessing. It is a curse that throws an occasional gift now and then. We were never meant to have this power. It was a mistake on the part of our creators. They left something deep inside our bloodline, and once in a while, for reasons unknown to us, it rears its ugly head and grants us the power of the gods," Mihaela said, and Regari gulped as he gazed downwards at the body of the limbo demon that is slowly turning to ash. With its essence sapped, there was nothing left to hold it together. Mihaela watched as he looked at his hands. He looked terrified as he gazed at his hands. He once looked like a child, but now he looked closer to a young adult. Essence pushes you towards your prime. As for me, biologically I'm 240 years old. That is when a draconian is strongest. But in reality I've lost count of the years I lived through. If you keep devouring essence, you will be immortal, but you will also have to one day bury all you hold dear," Mihaela said. "So it is a curse," Regari stammered. "Yes, for every blessing, a curse. That is the way of this world. Nothing is free. Better you learn how to control it than that very same hunger consuming you. It's lucky we found you early. The hunger worsens as you mature. If we never ran into you, there is a good chance you would devoured your sister," Mihaela said. Regari's eyes were wide. He clutched his stomach. His face was strained as if he was fighting to get the hunger under control. "It will take some getting used to, but now that you are aware of the hunger and have tried to feed it, it will seem more present. However, as you are now, you are far from in control," Mihaela said as she approached Regari. "You are stronger now. Careful not to get drunk on that power," Mihaela said. Regari opened his mouth to reply, but in a flash Mihaela slammed him into ground, closed the talons on her foot around his neck. "But not nearly strong enough," Mihaela said as Regari gagged and tired meekly to pry her feet off his neck. "There are two things you need to remember well, kid. The first is this. There are plenty of beings out there that can turn you into a puddle of red soup, staining the floor. As you are now, you are nothing but an insect to them. And as for the second," Mihaela said as she leaned down and locked eyes with him, "that hunger can never be sated. It will never go away, no matter how much you eat. Dig. Regari felt the strength in his body after he devoured that demon, and in a fit of naive overconfidence, he thought he would try his hand at sparring again. After all, his wounds were healed and his energy was back. Maybe he would stand a chance, right? Ah, to be young and naive, Surchak said as she lounged on an ornate couch she had somehow materialized. Regari glared at her as Anya bandaged up his hand. Don't know what the hell you were thinking. So you got some fancy ability, you ate one of us limbo demons, and you thought you could take on Mahala the Swift? She fought archangels and won, Anya said. Yeah, Regari grumbled in response. Don't give me that attitude. Anya snapped and Regari instinctively flinched. You need to be safe and healthy if you want to protect your sister. You think Rena is going to survive a new blood war without you? Anya added as she gave his bandages a tough tug and caused Regari to hiss in pain. Careful, girl. He may be a pushover with us ancients, but he can still rip your head off, Rosa said as she swirled a glass of blood and took a sip. Regari sighed as he glanced apologetically at Anya, who just gave him an annoyed look. He looked around again at the opulent tent that Surchax had summoned. She never bothered to take this out when they were on the road, but Regari supposed that now that they were stuck here for a while, she decided to use it. Either that, or she just likes messing with people. Probably a bit of both now that Regari thinks about it. So any idea how many people I need to devour before I get strong enough to beat Mahala? Regari asked with a sigh, and all he got was gaggle of laughs from the rest. You could eat Lucifer himself, and you wouldn't be able to beat Mahala. She is the best duelist to have ever picked up a sword, not counting her master, of course. But the rumors do say towards the end of her master's life, Mahala could go decently even against him. Even the great beast loses quite regularly against her. You are talking about killing a god boy. Best keep your ambitions in check, Rosa replied as she finished her cup of blood. She is the goddess of war in Zarima, you know. 1,000,000 warriors fall to their knees and pray to her for victory. Lest you forget, prayers have power. The seraphim are not the only ones who can benefit from prayers, Surchak said with a sly smile. Right, guess I gotta wait a few millennia, huh? Regari replied dryly. Oh, don't be so bummed, bumpkin, Surchak said, and Regari's eyebrows twitched in annoyance. There have always been those that are stronger than you, and that will always be the case. Just do your best to protect that which matters most to you, Surchax added airily. Regari paused and turned to look at Surchax. Was that good advice from Surchax? Apparently he wasn't the only one looking at her in surprise. Rosa was just looking stunned, and Alasta was just staring blankly at her. Huh, the hells really do drive people crazy, Alasta muttered as he went back to his wine. Oh, come now, I need to know these things you know. Most of the sailors are those decent, brave types. You have to know your market if you want to sell them something before you drown them, Surchax said with another laugh. Ah, that makes so much more sense, Rosa replied. Thank the hells, I thought I was in a nightmare, Alasta said. Ah, Regari muttered in response. So what are we doing now? We are just going to wait, Regari asked. The cleanup of Limbo should conclude soon, and that new brood mother is reorganizing the new hive here in hell. So for now we wait, Surchax said. Besides, I highly doubt that the great beast is just idling the time away. Dega. Ah, I love idling the days away, I said with a giggle as I snuggled deeper into my cushion. Friend, I do enjoy your company, but shouldn't you address the problem in hell? Cecilia asked. She was laying on the bed in a silk nightgown. Thanks to it being midnight, we could expect no interruptions. Oh, don't worry, Mahala is sprucing up a new toy. I'm just going to let her handle it for now, I said as I rolled over and lazily reached for the barrel of wine next to me. If you insist, although it is nice to see you relax every now and then, Cecilia replied with an airy laugh. So what do you plan to do now? Cecilia asked, and I paused for a moment before rolling back upright. That was an interesting question. Right now the global situation was chaotic, to say the least. Refugees were flooding into eastern Valyria. The Naga were picking off Devonian ships in droves, and the merchant princesses were being bled dry by their naval losers. Alasta, or should I say Asmodeus, was doing good work in Devonia. From what I can tell, the Devonian Empire has gone mad. It's threatening to collapse from within, despite the Seraphim's best efforts to maintain stability. It won't be long before an archangel will have to step in. And when that happens, plenty of demons will jump at the chance to try for the Archangel's head. Ambition is something no demon can walk away from. It is in their blood, and such temptation will push some to do something really stupid. As for the war in the north, it seems Nemesis has switched to a war of attrition. Nemesis seeks to bleed the strength of heaven rather than push for a decisive victory. A wise move considering the underlying game being played. But this does leave some hints to the Serpahim about what exactly was happening. Almost everything the Seraphim is facing aims to drain their strength. I wonder what will happen now that the Serpahim are feeling the pinch. I mused, and Cecilia just shrugged. Argue probably, Cecilia replied nonchalantly as she lazily rolled over in her bed. After that, they have to make a decision at some point. They won't last the year at this rate. Devourer is going to cave in months. Anyone worth a damn has fled. Right now, the only people left are probably the destitute, corrupt, and incompetent. I said, and Cecilia nodded. They will reach us soon. Eastern Valyria does not have the means to handle the wave of refugees. Cecilia replied with a lazy yawn. I never got that report, I said as I turned to look at her. Cecilia had gotten off the bed and walked over to her study table. I didn't get the report either, but I did get a letter, Cecilia replied cheekily, and I laughed. It's from Kikikazi. The Muguman Farseer Council has reached an agreement with parts of Eastern Valyria. Kikikazi has offered to send the refugees our way. The hive can detect demonic possession quite easily, and we have the resources to spare, Cecilia said as she put the letter down. These desperate wretches would have little faith in the Church of Order. They will swell the ranks of the faith of unity. Most of those who fled would generally be wiser or be people of means. The cowards would have arrived a long time ago. This is the main bulk, the tipping point where anyone with any sense would flee. Cecilia said as she glanced at her royal seal. I will tell Kaikazi to send them to us. They will be useful. Those of talent and ability would no doubt be useful, Cecilia said. More meat for the shield as well. What will the Seraphim look like when they attack the merciful empire that took in the people they failed to protect? I added with a laugh as I flexed my claws. I'm close now, almost there before I own this world. The cards are stacking my deck, and Seraphim bleed cards with every passing hour. The Seraphim are out of cards. There are no more Lightborn to protect you now. Chapter 206, The Fading Empire. Uriel flew alongside Gabriella, the Archangel of Diligence, and Sylvana, the Archangel of Peace, as they headed down towards the capital of Devonia. She could see her kin patrolling the skies and some of the cherubim reserves walking the streets. She remembers when this city shone as a testament of faith and stability. Now, however, it is like a rotting corpse. Reports say vast swathes of the population have fled and the nobility are going mad. Famine was on the horizon, with all the peasants abandoning their fields, and from the looks of things, the Valley of Plenty would not have enough reserves to feed the entire empire. They are already swamped with Devonian refugees, and demonic pact insurgents within the refugees have already begun destabilizing the region. Western Valyria was not doing much better. They turned to working with the Mugumans and the Avalonian Empire to handle the strain of the refugees and demon influence. What's worse, it seems the demons were avoiding the Avalonian Empire like the plague. The closer you get to an Avalonian flag, the less demons you find. Case in point, the Avalonian embassy in Devonia. You two go ahead to meet the Emperor. I have something I need to do, Uriel said, and she saw Gabriella about to protest, but Sylvana just nodded, instantly shutting Gabriella up. Uriel nodded in response, and she banked away from her fellows before heading for the embassy. She looked down and saw a camp sprouting around the embassy. It was an odd sight to have slums surrounding a beautiful and perfectly maintained white building. From what Uriel has observed, the Avalonians really like white marble, and they were running a far tighter ship as compared to the Devonian government. The nearly bottomless coffers of the Avalonian Empire was of course a great help. From what reports say, they were able to acquire vast quantities of food, both from the Empire and surrounding territories. Furthermore, as the rumors go, the Avalonian flag was a more effective ward against demons than even the best priests. It seems for some reason the demons fear the Avalonian Empire. It was honestly very insulting, especially with her own troops having had to run into the Avalonian camp for safety on a few occasions. The White Phoenix was now a symbol of safety within a dying empire. As Uriel reached the embassy, he saw a peculiar sight. A well-dressed nobleman was having a friendly chat with a cherubim. When Uriel approached, she saw the pair look up at her. The man had the sharp gaze of a warrior, the eyes of someone who had stared into the face of death. As for the young cherubim, she saw the light of innocence and adoration as he looked up at her. Uriel gently touched down on the smooth cobblestones of the embassy. The cherubim immediately rushed forward and gave her a deep bow. "Archangel, what brings you here?" the cherubim said. Uriel glanced down at him, and her heart ached at the sight of his small, stunted wings. This affliction was spreading, and the tears of mothers who birthed cherubim were growing with each passing year. What's even more concerning is when the cherubim breed, there is no further degradation. Some scholars call it genetic stability, the point where a humanoid race declines no further. The humans are a good example, weak, short-lived, yet quick to breed, and have an extremely stable bloodline. Although at times the light of heaven seems to shine the brightest in the lowliest of its children. Uriel cast a casual glance around the camp and saw cherubim helping the destitute and the needy. "Just wishing to check on the state of this camp. And what is your name, little one?" Uriel said kindly as the small cherubim snapped to attention. "I am Yael, cherubim trooper first class." Yael said eagerly, his bright blue eyes shining. "And your family name?" Uriel asked, and Yael's bright eyes dulled for just a moment before returning to its usual luster. "Don't have a family, Archangel. My parents didn't want me on account of these," Yael said as he tilted slightly and flapped a pair of tiny wings no bigger than a hand. The cherubim look like young teenagers. In perhaps a fit of irony, they resemble the petite forms of the light-born. They had the physique of a light-born, but none of their power. Sylvana, for instance, was rumored to have light-born blood, or perhaps being among the angels that were the transition between angels and light-born. Cherubim were still stronger than your average human, but in the end they did not have the immortality granted to the seraphim. They would age and they would die just like the mortal races. "I see," Uriel said with a soft, sad smile. She wished that her kin would treasure these forgotten children, but alas, that was not to be. Cherubim being abandoned as babies was not uncommon. Now, millennia on, there were entire communities of cherubim living apart from the rest of heaven. They were a simple people, but they were happy and always grateful for what they had. "Oh, don't worry about it, Archangel. Stories like that are pretty common amongst us cherubim. In fact, earning a name is a goal for many of us," Yael replied with a wide smile. At those words, the noble man let out an appreciative chuckle. "That is why I do enjoy the company of cherubim. They are an admirable bunch," the noble man said as he gave Uriel a bow. "I am Baron Zarkov, an elevated veteran of the many conflicts that formed the Avalonian Empire," Zarkov said as he gave Uriel a salute. Uriel glanced at Zarkov and saw a plain but scarred man. He has walked many a battlefield and seen things that would have left men broken. With his simple brown hair and brown eyes, he would pass for a common mercenary. To be promoted to a position as ambassador to the Devourer, he must be a rather exceptional individual. "Many conflicts?" Uriel asked. I was one of the few who sided with the Empress the earliest. The war with Tralis was boring, but we had to put down a few small-scale uprisings. The real fight was during the Black Crusade. I was on the front line and managed to distinguish myself. Some quick thinking on my end led to our section of the line holding. I even managed to wound a blood knight," Zarkov said with a laugh. "Wound a blood knight, with no silver or enchantments?" Uriel asked. "Yeah, I set my sword on fire and managed to land a good hit. I almost got hit with a spell, but this hive soldier jumped in front of me. Seems strange that I owe my life to some nameless beast," Zarkov said wistfully. "Anyway, the Empress promoted me for my valor, and she saw fit to send me here. Grand General Montis said my unorthodox approach to problems would prove useful in a demon-infested cesspit," Zarkov said with crooked grin that would belong on mercenary, not a noble. "You are quite amusing, Lord Zarkov, but if you don't mind me asking, what instructions did you receive?" It seems the ambassador of a rival power is setting up a refugee camp in and around the embassy, Uriel noted as she glanced around at the surroundings. Oh, this? Well, my job was to gather information on what was going on. If this place goes tits up, the Crown will want to know. Last thing we want is the damned demons getting a foothold here. Also, the Empress allowed me to offer you this courtesy. She expects your forces are spread thin and you might not have the time to scout the west. The vampire Counts has recently beaten back an incursion from Umbara. The demons aren't only stirring shit in the east, Zarkov said, and Uriel paused at those words and she narrowed her eyes slightly. And what courtesy would Her Grace ask for in return? Uriel asked. Well, the Empress did not specify, but Grand General Audias de Renge did mention asking you to perhaps mention to the elves that they should stop attacking Necronas, Zarkov said, and his gaze grew uncertain as a thrill of fear passed across his face. Is that so? Uriel asked as she gazed at him intently. He meant it as advice, Archangel. He would not be so presumptuous to make a request to you directly. It is just that, well, rumor has it the great beast's patience is running thin with the elves. Zarkov muttered as he looked away. The fear for the great beast and his hive was not without reason. Although the common folk sees docile workers slaving away to secure their futures, the Empire's soldiers know the hive's terror all too well. They were not created as laborers. They were created as weapons by the old gods themselves. Then perhaps it is time for me to bring this up to the council. Thank you for your candor, Lord Zarkov, Uriel replied courteously. Of course, Archangel, both the Empress and myself believe cordial relations with High Heaven is to our mutual benefit. A war between us would serve neither side, Zarkov said as he gave her a bow. Now on to official matters. Is there something I can assist you with, Archangel? Zarkov asked. No, that is not necessary. I am just here to speak to some of the refugees here. You have done an admirable job ensuring the safety of this place, Uriel said with a smile. She had read the reports, and she was certainly surprised that someone from the Avalonian Empire would decided to help Devonia. Shamefully, she also felt a little upset that he succeeded. Heaven was being outdone in almost every area. I have done only what my Empress commands. Her orders are clear: preserve the common folk. The aristocracy can fend for themselves. Those who have fallen should face the fall, but these people have done nothing. Their guilt belonged to their leaders, but the punishment was levied to them. Zarkov said sincerely, Then would you like to walk with me? This encampment is rather recent, and I have yet to tour it, Uriel stated. Zarkov looked away in apprehension for a moment before casting a doubtful glance at Uriel. I don't think you will enjoy the company of my security detail. My Empress has given strict orders that I am not to leave the embassy without them, Zarkov remarked uncomfortably. And who protects you? Uriel asked as she looked around him. The place was unoccupied, but she was no fool. She had heard how the inquisitors in Devonia felt like they were being tailed. Uriel could cast a detection spell to reveal them, but she felt that would be acting in poor faith. Zarkov just sighed as he snapped his fingers. Instantly, a pair of large, towering Naga and a pair of hive creatures materialized. Her Silver Maiden guards all readied their weapons, and the Naga did the same as they moved forward to shield Zarkov. Uriel raised a hand and gestured for her guards to stand down. The Silver Maidens hesitated for a moment before sheathing their weapons. The Naga snarled before stepping back, their heavy gold tridents glowing with powerful enchantments. She recognized these Naga. They were Abyssal Guard, Surchax's personal retinue. They guarded only the deepest of her halls. Rumors have it that Surchax had them selectively bred. They were towering monstrosities, each almost 3 meters tall, with arms as wide as tree trunks. They wielded two-handed tridents that had prongs so thick they could be used as maces to bash their enemies into mush. Their strength was strong enough that they could splatter foes even underwater. Above ground, they were even stronger and faster. They were, after all, accustomed to combat under the crushing weight of the ocean. They were large but not slow, quiet but far from dull. Will you stay your blades? Uriel asked as she glared at the two Naga. Our alliance binds us. As long as our charge is unharmed, we will not harm you. One of the abyssal guards said, his voice deep and guttural like some kind of primal predator. "Are those your orders?" Uriel asked. "Yes, the mistress has commanded us to protect this place. The Hellspawn are wise enough to stay away and leave us in peace. I hope you will be as wise, although we will not be disappointed if you turn out to be foolish," the abyssal guard said in challenge. One of her guards hissed in anger and took a step forward, but with a wave of her hand she calmed the Silver Maiden. "Sisters, this is neutral ground. We will not fall for petty provocations," Uriel said calmly. "As you command, Archangel," the Silver Maiden said in a clipped tone as she resumed her post behind Uriel. "Shall we commence our walk?" Zarkov asked as he glanced at the two Naga who let out snarls before retreating slightly. "As long your monsters are leashed," one of her guards said, and Uriel rounded on her, eyes filled with fury. The Silver Maiden visibly wilted under Uriel's gaze, and the Naga laughed. "It seems you are the one on a leash, Angel," the Naga said with a deep rumbling chuckle. "My sisters and I believe in loyalty, not leashes, Naga." Uriel replied calmly, and the Naga just laughed in response. "The high heavens, traitors all," the Naga rumbled in response. "Your loyalty to the old gods is admirable, abyssal guard, but I hope you will forgive us if we do not wish to live under their crushing tyranny." Uriel replied diplomatically. "Save your justifications, Seraphim. You are no better than the masters you claim to overthrow. You nothing but a pale shadow of the real thing. Like it or not, this world operates on a simple rule. The strong do as they will, the weak suffer what they must," the Naga replied, and Uriel narrowed her eyes at those words. "Ataza, Sazu, perhaps you two could take the lead through the encampment. You have proven effective at sniffing out demons," Zarkov said suddenly, cutting through the thorny brush this conversation had become. "As you command, Ambassador," the one named Ataza said as he moved forward. "Feel free to cower behind us, Angel," Sazu said as he moved past the Silver Maidens. Uriel shot her glare before she could retort, and Uriel saw her bite her lip as she shifted position to the rear. "Yael, perhaps you could attend me as well," Uriel said, and the small cherubim nodded hesitantly before falling in step behind. Yael nervously cloothed the light spear in his hands as he glanced nervously at the hulking backs of the abyssal guard. "I can feel your gaze, Rat." Ataza grumbled, and Yael visibly jumped in fear, but he put on a brave face and soldiered on. "Please do not antagonize my soldiers," Uriel said, a dangerous edge in her voice. "As you say, Angel," Ataza replied, spitting the word angel like it was slur. His tone betrayed that he was not intimidated in the slightest. Uriel internally sighed. She could easily defeat these two, but they were fanatics. They feared Surchax's enemies as much as they feared water. "Now then, what shall we visit first? Perhaps the chapel," Zarkov said, his tone calm, completely unfazed by the blatant hostility crackling in the air. "Yes, perhaps that would be a good start," Uriel said as she followed in step with Zarkov. The two Naga, hearing this, took a turn at one of the winding streets and started to move with more purpose. "So you get your additional provisions from the canal behind the embassy," Uriel stated, and Zarkov nodded amicably. "The Devonian crown is desperate for supplies and gold. If we imported through normal channels, they would be taxed and tithed until only crumbs remained. However, if we imported the supplies in as supplies for the embassy, it is exempt from all taxation, tithes, and inspections," Zarkov said, and Sasu let out a chuckle at those words. "We guard the ships, the very same species that ravages their waters. The ships then hand over the supplies to the embassy of an empire that is ruled by an ancient beast, who also commands a hive. We then pass it on to one of your rats to distribute. The weaklings they call nobles in this land have neither the strength nor will to contest this state of affairs," Sasu said with another grumbling chuckle. "The Devonian crown and aristocracy does not see the value in antagonizing powers far beyond them. After all, you kin are the only thing stopping the demons from devouring this nation whole," Zarkov said to Uriel before giving Yael an approving nod. "Your cherubim do good work. My forces have saved a few of your cherubim in a pinch. This safe zone is technically not sovereign ground of the Avalonian Empire, and technically our military presence here is an invasion," Zarkov mused as he stroked his beard. Yet the crown permits it, because they cannot contest it, Uriel stated. Not exactly, Zarkov said with a rather sheepish smile. Yes, not exactly, Yael muttered from her side. What do you mean, Ambassador? Uriel asked as she turned to look at Zarkov. This an escape route if they lose control of the Empire, the demons. The embassy is both safety and an escape route. Cowards all, Ataza said with a laugh. More blunt than how I would have said it. But yes, essentially that is the gist of it. I have also sent some assurances to the aristocracy regarding asylum here, should they require it. Some have taken up the offer, some have reacted rather poorly. Well, one of them anyway, Zarkov said as he grimaced. A disgraced noble arrived at our gates, demanding we return the sovereign territory. In his rage, he violated the boundary of the embassy and attempted to attack me. Zarkov admitted with a small sigh. At those words, the Ataza laughed again. We ate well that day, Ataza said, and Sasu laughed as well. Yes, it was rather illustrative demonstration of Naga eating habits. He had no idea my guards were there, of course, thanks to concealment spells, but it was illustrative regardless. It turns out tridents work quite well as forks. Seems quite obvious, really, in hindsight. Zarkov said nonchalantly. Tridents work well for a great many things. Ataza said as he suddenly stopped. Uriel sensed something in the crowd around them. The people were looking apprehensively at them, but some had a different look in their eyes. This place may not have active demon warriors, but spies and infiltrators could still slip the net. Ataza sniffed the air and let out a growl. I smell hellspawn, Ataza said as he readied his weapon. Uriel sensed it too. Her centuries of fighting demons were not wasted on just pure combat. Ready yourself, sisters. I smell brimstone. It seems your nose works, Archangel. They are close, very close. Chapter 207, Ego. Divine Eye, under Divine Flag, Wrath of the Righteous, Demon's Bane, Uriel intoned as she bathed her and her allies in buffs. Shouldn't have done that, Ataza growled. One of the Silver Maidens began, but Ataza swiftly cut her off. Killing them isn't the problem, it's finding them. Ataza growled. Somehow, I don't think it will matter. They aren't here for all of you, they are here for me, Uriel said as she scanned the surroundings and saw all those with demonic ether signatures staring right at her. There you are, Ataza said, and in a flash he had hurled a javelin right at one of the civilians. The javelin punched clean through the man's chest, and his body crumpled to the ground. From his shadow emerged a succubus with pinkish skin and small curved horns. The moment the succubus emerged, Yael let out a shot of divine energy from his light spear. The light spears were rather crude weapons developed to give the cherubim a fighting chance against the foes of heaven. The cherubim were too small to serve well in melee unless they were facing simple humans or dwarves. Against the more powerful races, they stood little chance in a direct clash. So light spears were designed to let the cherubim fire bolts of divine energy at a distance. The bolts were reasonably effective, but against targets with high defense, they were practically useless. A mere platoon of veterans from the Wrathring would eat a cherubim company alive. This weakness was so well known that some of the more callous members of High Heaven have started calling the light spear torch lights, deriding the weapons as something that can only shine a vaguely threatening beam of light. However, in skilled hands, it was far from an ineffective weapon. Yael's first shot was dodged as the succubus ducked to the right, but Yael's next shot slammed right into her face, and then another followed into her chest, right where her heart was. Flaming blood spewed from her wounds, and she crumpled to the ground. A moment later, the body crumbled to ash as she succumbed to her wounds. Uriel glanced at Yael, and the happy and overly energetic cherubim was gone. Now he had the eyes of a vigilant soldier as he scanned the surroundings. Not bad, Ataza said, as he glanced at the surrounding tents. Uriel could see figures hiding in the shadows. The innocents had long since fled. The only ones who remained were those possessed by demons. Archangel, we should leave, one of her guards said as she lifted off the ground. No, this is a perfect chance to clean out this camp. We fight on. Uriel replied as she summoned her staff, the top ignited with golden flame, forming a curved fiery blade. As you command. Her guards replied as they took up defensive positions. Uriel hefted her staff, and then the demons swarmed them. These were not soldiers, just infiltrators. The searing hells must have quite a bounty on her head. It was to be expected, of course, but regardless, demons wanted her head was nothing new. Divine Lance. Uriel shot a gold blade right at a pouncing demon. The blade struck the demon with enough force to send it flying into a nearby tent. She glanced at the Naga and saw Ataza smash an attacking demon into red mist with sheer brute strength. Another demon pounced on top of Ataza, latching onto his wide back. The demon tried to stab down into his neck, but the blade just bounced off his scales, spewing sparks. Worm! Ataza growled as he grabbed the demon with one hand and slammed her into the ground, splattering her across the mud. Yael was firing his light spear for dear life, and to his credit, he was quite good at it. His shots mostly struck home, and the amount of dying demons lying around from his shots was slowly growing. Honor Guard, Uriel intoned, and a group of 6 golden swords appeared around her. When a demon got too close, one of the swords shot out and skewered it. These demons were chaff. They were just swayed by the promise of power and prestige. But they were fools. With the strength they have now, the best they could hope for was to become one of Lord Mammon's court jesters if they succeeded. The demon Prince of Lust would use them until he tired of them, and then they would be discarded. Better they end here, rather than face the tortures that await them. Uriel cut down another charging demon when she sensed a commotion. She turned to see a squad of cherubim charging out of mass of destroyed tents, their light spears firing at every demon in sight. In just a few moments, Uriel found herself behind a bristling wall of spears. The small bodies of the cherubim were in front of her, shielding her from any harm. Then she saw more light spear bolts in the distance. Word must have gotten out, and it seems every cherubim in the area was now converging on this location. The battle went on rather uneventfully for a few more minutes, but it was soon over. Just a handful left to clean up. She watched Yael take down another fleeing demon, and the fallen demon was soon blasted by half a dozen shots from the other cherubim. Uriel lowered her weapon as she scanned the surroundings. She glanced at her guards and saw them standing next to a dozen dead demons. As expected, they weren't even fazed. In truth, Uriel wanted to use herself to lure some of the demons out, while at the same time speaking to refugees here, but somehow things seemed to be going a bit too well. Uriel stepped back slightly as the Ataza threw a decapitated demon corpse past her, and she looked around again. All the cherubim in the area were now here, and judging by the number of demon corpses, that should be most of the demons in the area. Yet, there should be a leader here, someone stronger than these chaff. Check the bodies, see if you can find their leader, Uriel said to the cherubim, who all saluted and rushed off to check the bodies. A leader? I doubt a wiser demon would attack. Demons are schemers first, soldiers second. Ataza growled as he shook off some of the blood on offal stuck to his trident. Yes, but we should still check, Zarkov said as he glanced at the carnage around them. You seem quite calm, Ambassador, Uriel stated, and Zarkov just shrugged. Stared death in the face enough times to know when I'm outmatched. If the demons get past all of you, I'm as good as dead. Zarkov replied as he stepped out of the way of an expanding pool of blood. You would be surprised how often this happens in this city, Ataza said as he shook off the last of the gore from his weapon. Yes, I have been attacked a few times on the way to the palace. However, the valiant efforts of the cherubim have made things better, and I have not been attacked in quite a while, Zarkov said as he gave Yael a kind smile. Now then, once you are done checking the bodies, shall we head to the chapel? Zarkov added. Uriel nodded, and as expected, the leader wasn't here. That callous brute must have just sent their servants to die, perhaps hoping their deaths could provide a window of attack. But seeing as she now more protected than when she arrived, it seems his plan has failed. But then again, demons failing is nothing new. When the group reached the chapel, they found themselves being met by a haggard group of priests and priestesses. They all looked exhausted, and their white robes were stained with dirt and blood. The chapel itself was nothing more than a hastily constructed wooden building. The banners of the Church of Order were torn and swaying listlessly in the wind, and the amount of sick and wounded was so large they were spilling out of the building. Overall, it was a rather poignant example of the state of the church, like a sick man clinging to life, all its members flailing against the dying of the light. In the back of her mind, Uriel doubted if the Devonian Empire could be saved. This place was once the jewel of the faith, a model of what a nation should be. But now, it was a sick, dying nation, and the nation that has eclipsed it by far is ruled by an ancient monster. Corruption was rife, the demons were everywhere, and the people flee in droves. The Inquisitors report that any refugees that arrive in the Avalonian Empire almost always abandon the faith. In a lot of ways, Uriel didn't blame them. They have been failed so utterly in their home nation. Then they go to another empire that is everything that is deemed anathema by the Church, and what do they see? Peace and prosperity. Not a demon in sight. The demons that have brought low their home tremble before the banner of the White Phoenix. Uriel looked around and was annoyed to see some members of the hive guarding the location. She noted one particular hive soldier. It was this dog-like creature. She had seen these types of troops before, an extremely simple yet effective design. At a glance, it wasn't very powerful. It was strong relative to a human, that was of little doubt. Its fangs and claws were more than enough to rip your average human to shreds. But its real strength came from its tail. That scorpion-like tail was tipped with venomous spines. It was strange to see. The models she had intelligence on used those synthetic foci crystals. Judging by its worn and scarred appearance, this one has been alive for a long time. The beast paused as it slowly approached her. The Naga paused as well as they observed the beast approach. Uriel could tell they were not fearful, but they did find it odd. The creature slowly prowled forward, and as it approached, Uriel got a better look at it. It was horribly scarred, its white carapace marred by old wounds. Then the haggard priests approached. Uriel listened to their fears and grievances, and in turn, Uriel feared and grieved. The institutions of the empire were collapsing. From what Uriel was hearing, it wouldn't be long before the Serpahim would have to step in to take over some aspects of government. Please, Archangel, the Serpahim must intervene. The crown has fallen, their souls are lost, the most senior priest begged. Uriel could only nod in understanding. This was news to her, but it didn't change the plan at all. They were already planning to take over the empire. This just gave Uriel more confirmation that it was necessary. Soon there would have to purges, and from what her agents have reported, entire noble bloodlines would have to be purged. The risk of corruption was too great. She would soon have to unleash the Inquisitors upon the empire. They would kill every member of a corrupt house, all the way down to the babies. Root and stem, the Inquisitors called it. Leave no weed alive in heaven's garden. Fear not, salvation is coming, good priest, Uriel said gently. Is that so, Angel? Uriel shifted her gaze and saw that hive soldier from before, smiling at her. Then it spoke. You will save these wretched creatures? The beast said, as it slowly walked towards her. Its voice was deep and sounded like grating glass. Uriel paused as she stared at the beast. Common hive soldiers could not talk, and this one did not seem that powerful, certainly not any different from the other soldiers. You can talk, Uriel said as she turned to look at the beast. Most of us can. We just choose not to. The beast revealed, and Uriel felt her blood run cold. Hive soldiers were supposed to be dull, rabid beasts, not intelligent creatures. Then why have you chosen to speak? Uriel asked as she narrowed her eyes. I do not know. We understand yet we do not. We are one mind, yet separate. Petty language cannot fully explain what we are, the beast said as it approached. The Naga got out of the way, her silver maidens tensed, and Zarkov? Zarkov was surprised. He did not know this was possible. Do you have a message? Uriel asked. No, none. Just felt like talking. Long have I served, and yet you speak of salvation. The beast said, and Uriel furrowed her brow. What it just said made little sense. What does you serving have to do with salvation? Uriel pressed. Although she was unnerved, she realized this was a golden opportunity to learn about how a hive creature thinks. Perhaps the great beast's hold on his minions is not as strong as he thinks it is. Everything? You think these souls can be saved? By what? The rot is deep. You cannot save them. They have no unity. Without a master, they will tear each other apart, the beast said, still making little sense. And your kind can offer salvation, Uriel pressed. My king offers purpose, to be both known and unknowable. These wretched creatures you call priests beg and mewl like children. They seek something that doesn't exist. They are false and dead things. No power nor choice, the beast said. We have a choice. We are the masters of our own fate, one of the priests said, and at those words the beast laughed. You hold your own life, but you control nothing. All of you live because my king allows it. You will all die when he demands it, the beast said as it turned away. Are you threatening this empire? Uriel asked, and the beast paused before turning, its head slightly. You should know this well, Archangel. Power is a threat to all within reach, the beast said before ambling off, all of the terrified humans giving it a wide berth. Take a good long look, Angel. You are watching the death throes of an era. Chapter 208. Manifestation. Malthusia sat in a tent and picked her nails idly. She glanced up as she sensed movement outside. Judging by the footfalls, it was her contact in this wretched world. Communications were erratic, to say the least. Things were not as they seemed. Although being a member of the Ars Goetia, Malthusia was at best a minor member of the demon nobility. Most minor members of the Ars Goetia ended being used as agents. Malthusia herself was no different. Being a succubus and lust demon, she was very aware of the power of desire. What set her apart from the rest was, oddly enough, was a natural talent for economics. The searing hells were a place where scarcity ruled the economic landscape. With most demons being basically just balls of endless demand with legs, hell was just a place of endless demand and horrifically inadequate supply. Enough was never enough, and so the ability to make sure the right people got the things they wanted was quite a profitable venture. Through some careful trading and a good understanding of Goetia law, Malthusia built quite the enterprise back in hell. That was until Lord Asmodeus, of all people, demanded to speak with her. It turns out she was being sent to Terra to orchestrate the economic collapse of the Devonian Empire. Malthusia was useless in a fight that she knew all too well. The reason was simple: she was a coward. Well, most demons were cowards, but she was especially cowardly. So she was contemplating running when the summons came, but apparently Lord Asmodeus was a step ahead of her. Long story short, the day before she was supposed to escape, she went to bed and woke up in front of Asmodeus's throne. The cheeky bastard woke her up a minute after midnight, effectively following the rules of his summons. So now she was stuck in this cesspit, trying to bleed this empire dry. It was working to an extent, but the real benefits came from a bit of external help. She watched as the white hound-like creature enter. It had a horrifically scarred body, and its frame it looked to be a much older design, as compared to its kin within the hive. Ego, Malthusia said unhappily as she gazed at the hound. Malthusia, always a pleasure, Ego drawled as it entered the tent. Ego was a hulking creature, bigger than the other hounds, yet his frame seemed unrefined. Though most hive specimens were technically genderless, he did prefer a male identity for some reason. The angels are at the chapel, Ego stated as it sat down. Its scorpion-like tail pointed squarely at Malthusia. Of course they are. They are talking, no doubt, flapping their lips about how these fools need help. Your empire will be able to help them, but somehow I suspect it won't be enough. Malthusia replied, No, this rot serves my king's designs. This game will weaken the angels, so it serves my king well. Continue your efforts, and there just may be a reward for you, Ego said as he flashed a fanged smile at Malthusia. Reward? Malthusia asked as she glanced Ego. You tire of the Ars Goetia, do you not? You will always be a rat to them. Nothing you ever do will change that, Ego said, and Malthusia subtly clenched her fist at that statement. Even a blind man could see that to be the case. This damned dog, his words cut deeper than his spines. My king takes many talents into his service. Many of the denizens of hell have strengths my king needs. I am sure I do not need to remind you The original purpose of the hives, Ego said, and Malthusia narrowed her eyes at those words. You all were made to survive, to serve. We were made as weapons. Ego said with another low laugh. Yet survive you did, seeing as you decided to hide here of all places, Ego said as he glanced at the shabby tent. Malthusia grimaced at those words. It was true, she always tried to find the most unassuming locations to hide. The prettiest flower is plucked first, and Malthusia has only lasted this long because she has kept her head down. Surely you want a better lot in life? Or is being a rat entertaining to you? Not for me to judge, of course. I know you demons have some odd proclivities. Ego said with another chuckle. What rewards? Malthusia hissed through gritted teeth. So eager, so desperate. I am surprised, Malthusia. Someone like you should know never to seem desperate in negotiations. Ego said with a wry grin. Listen here, you stupid mutt. Do you know what Asmodeus told me last week? He just told me to listen to you bunch of single-minded freaks. He left me here to rot when things go tits up. Do you think the Asmodeus would send someone to come and rescue me? This isn't a mission, it's an execution. Malthusia hissed in response. This isn't a negotiation, this is an offer. Tell me what you want, and if I live to tell the tale, you will have it. Malthusia spat in response. My, desperate aren't we? Ego replied, his insufferable crooked smile still plastered across his muzzle. 2 cherubim have already popped their heads into this fucking tent to check on me. They seem to think I am a terrified girl, but those stupid stunted chickens will eventually figure out what the hell I am. Malthusia hissed. Yes, especially since the Inquisitors are coming. Ego said, and Malthusia's face went pale. I did what you asked. I threw half my assets against that archangel. I threw my brittle blades against a granite wall and shattered them on your behalf. In doing so, I attracted heaven's attention to this fucking slum. Give me something to work with. Malthusia spat. How about a position inside the Empire? A skilled financial planner like yourself would prove useful in the Empire. If my king makes the case for it, I am sure Asmodeus would happily use you as a gift, Ego said. So I get sold to an ancient beast, like a common piece of meat? Malthusia asked. No, of course not, Ego replied, and Malthusia grit her teeth at the sight of the widening smile on his face. You have already been sold like a common piece of meat. You will move into the embassy soon as a common servant. You will continue to orchestrate the slow disintegration of this place and funnel anything worth a damn to the Empire. In exchange, you will receive an excellent position in the ministries of the Avalonian Empire, complete with better perks than you would ever receive in hell. That was my king's offer, Ego said, and Malthusia paused. This wasn't an offer, it was order, and she had been bartered and sold. But it wasn't a bad deal. It was a pretty good one. A deal she would have accepted regardless. Does it mean anything if I accept? Malthusia asked gingerly. Of course not. Now pack your things. Deg. Zarkov bid his guards good night, and both Naga gave him their usual curt nod as they turned away. They were a strange bunch, these Naga, so stiff yet with such flexibility of mind. They were loyal in the extreme, but perhaps that alone has its uses. Zarkov let out a small sigh as he walked towards his office. As he moved, his eyes moved to the white walls and the banners that adorned them. The great white phoenix held in the jaws of the great beast. It was a brutal image, but it was also honest. Another interpretation could be that the Empire could hide behind the fangs of the great beast. The perspective of the way the banner is designed certainly seems to imply that to an extent. Zarkov glanced at the other wall and saw another banner. This one was the banner of the hive. Why a Gestalt consciousness even needed a banner was odd to say the least, but in truth this banner was for the humans. It gave a face to the endless swarm of lethal creatures hiding beneath the ground. But somehow Zarkov couldn't help but feel the design was alien. There were many patterns and symbols he did not recognize. Most prominently of all were those symbols of intertwining lines. At a glance, the symbols looked ancient. He had seen more than one angel staring in confusion at the banner. The Empire's best bestiarians fared no better. Zarkov had chatted with the royal Bestarian Beatrice Godwin, and she of all people was puzzled. She even has a copy of the banner hanging in her study. Rumors say she spends time in her day just staring at it, as if she was trying to glean some ancient secret from the patterns. The only clear things there were the jaws around a similar winding symbol, the words and the fact that the border was designed like an ancient shield. Mysteries within mysteries, Zarkov knew better than to attempt to fathom the unfathomable. After the battle with Tralis, and when he saw the sheer power the hive could muster, Zarkov will admit he was fascinated. Before his deployment here, he spent a good amount of time speaking with the Bestarians, and what he found was an enigma. It was clear they understood next to nothing about the hive, much to their chagrin. A few sporadic accounts, some superficial observations, but nothing really concrete, nothing at all on their inner workings, only how the hive members have mentioned their ways were unfathomable to humans. Judging by some of the sporadic accounts of humans having their minds shattered when connecting to hive minds, Zarkov was inclined to believe in its unfathomable nature. He let out a small sigh before heading to his study. When he opened the door, the first thing he did was notice the slight breeze coming from within. He never left the window open because of the frequent rain, which means someone had let themselves in. Seeing what happened today, he had a pretty good guess who it was. When he looked into the room, he saw none other than Ego sitting on the floor, his massive frame curled up on the carpet. How was the charade, Ambassador? Is the Archangel done flapping her lips to the condemned? Ego asked, as he sat up, raising his large, hulking head. It went as one could expect. I assume that attack was your idea, Zarkov said as he glared at Ego. Zarkov didn't like speaking to the members of the hive. Just a simple conversation would be enough to tell these creatures respected life as much as they respected dung. Well, not mine alone. I had some help. My mind is not mine alone after all, Ego said with a laugh as he got up and prowled across the carpet. Zarkov always felt Ego was odd. The other hives were all business, cold, apathetic even. But Ego was uncannily sarcastic and fun-loving, with humor as dry as the Zariman Desert. A demon will be joining your embassy soon. My king has given the order. She is capable at manipulating the economy. She will use her wiles to starve this empire further, Ego said, and Zarkov's eyebrow visibly twitched in annoyance. You want me to take care of some random succubus you plucked off the street, and you are just telling me this now? Zarkov spat. The arrangements have been made, so you need not do anything, Ego said as he started moving towards the window. Zarkov narrowed his eyes as he stared at the retreating Ego. Wait, are you sure the great beast knows what you are doing? Zarkov asked as he stared at Ego. Somehow in the back of his mind, he can't help but feel Ego was an outlier in the hive. He seemed to run his own show, but somehow the rest of the hive just went along with it. Either Ego was a rebel, or the hive was not as it seemed. Sharp one, aren't you? But yes, my king is aware. Feel free to send them a message requesting confirmation. Since you are curious, I will give you one small hint, Ego said right as he placed a paw on the window frame. I was not made into this body. I just like the way it feels. I watched as Ego crawled away into his small hovel and lay down wearily. This body wouldn't last much longer. The fatigue was getting to him, and he would soon have to switch hosts. Ego was an odd creature. My evolutions have allowed something strange to occur. The hive mind had birthed an individual made of 1,000,000 consciousnesses. I gave him the name Ego, because he is in fact the ego of the hive. I pulled my mind from the hive, and I glanced at the new body I had been making for him. He just popped up a few weeks after I arrived, and I didn't even realize at first. Making him obey was easy enough, but he was unpredictable. However, he was extremely intelligent, and, from what I can tell, potentially absurdly useful. He also had a weird fascination with dog bodies. He did not have a body. Instead, he lived within the hive mind itself. Malagaros has started calling these types of consciousness ghosts, which was oddly appropriate. It was troubling to an extent, especially considering that I could not create another ghost. It seems this might be a natural version of Legiana, but even though Ego has the ability for it, I would say he does not have the temperament. But let's see how he does regardless. He has done so well so far. I wonder what he can do once I loosen the leash even further. Ego. Surprise me. Chapter 209. A World of Rot. Surchax took a bite of her favorite fried potato snack as she watched the show. To Surchax's credit, she felt she had done an excellent job running the show. After all, no one had died yet, but that might change in the near future. Old Tobias had decided to follow this merry band after all. What a fall from grace this poor soul had. Once he was a semi-competent warrior, but now he was just a rage-filled mess. A soldier without a cause, or perhaps a fanatic without one. It was a good thing, really, that Mihaela popped back. Surchax would have just killed him. At least Mihaela would give him a chance to walk away, or maybe just beat him to the floor. Mihaela had returned from hell to check on things, and it just so happened that this idiot had finally found them. "Hello, Uncle," Mihaela greeted Tobias, her voice cold, her hands lightly resting on the handles of her rapiers. "Mihaela, where is it?" Tobias spat. "Where is what?" Mihaela asked as she stared him down. "The great beast? You smell of terror. You left recently. There is no world gate here," Tobias said, his approach and tone betraying his desperation. "Not one more step. I do not have the power to free you of your chains. It is no one's fault but your own that you bear the Morning Star brand," Mihaela warned Tobias, her right blade leaving its hilt ever so slightly. Surchax let out a little giggle as she took another bite of the tasty and crunchy snack. The Elysians really did know how to make food. "No, not you. The great beast does. I know what it is." "It can free me," Tobias said. "As you are, he would more than likely just eat you," Surchax said with a laugh. Tobias twitched at those words, turning towards Surchax as if he were about to pounce on her. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Mihaela said, stepping towards Surchax as if she were about to shield her. "She doesn't need your protection," Tobias spat. "No, you do. The only thing keeping you alive right now is me and those potato snacks in her hand," Mihaela said, glancing at Surchax, who was still happily munching away. "If you truly suffer so much, I could always set you free," Surchax said with a gleam in her eyes. The glowing arcane eye on her forehead flashed to life, and Tobias took an uneasy step back. Surchax didn't actually have a human form, it was an illusion. But her illusion magic was powerful enough that it could lie to the world itself, causing the transformation to become reality. "I suggest you leave," Mihaela said as she glanced down at his chest, where the Morning Star was branded into his flesh. "You struck a bargain, Uncle. Magna Morningstar is not a kind woman. I thought you knew that going in," Mihaela stated, and Tobias's face visibly turned purple. "Don't," Mihaela warned, but it was too late. Tobias drew his battle axe and swung at Mihaela. In a flash, Mihaela had drawn her right rapier and parried the swing. "Don't," Mihaela warned again, but he kept going. Surchax could see the obvious skill difference. Mihaela's movements were efficient and controlled, while Tobias fought like a wild berserker. It was a poor strategy, considering Mihaela had felled dragons single-handedly. Even Surchax herself had little interest in fighting her. But for someone like Tobias, well, Surchax enjoyed a fun distraction like anyone else. Each wild swing was easily parried by Mihaela as Tobias's face purpled with rage and desperation. "Black Flame Tempest," Tobias roared as his axe ignited with black flame. Surchax smirked as she saw Mihaela's eyes narrow. That was a dangerous spell. Those black flames ignite anything they touch and are a pain to extinguish. They literally burn the soul from the body. Mihaela ducked under the swing and delivered a hard punch to Tobias with her left hand. The strike stunned Tobias, and with his concentration broken, the black flame went out. Then, with a speed Surchax couldn't even follow, Mihaela's right foot shot toward Tobias's head. Her raptor claws closed around his skull, and he was brought down into the dirt. "I suggest you go off and cool down," Mihaela said simply, digging her talons into Tobias's throat. "The great beast will not return for a few more weeks at least." "You may speak with him then," Mihaela said coldly as she released him. Tobias got to his feet, thoroughly humiliated, his face still twisted with rage. "Careful, Uncle. If we do this again, I am going to kill you. For the friendship we once shared, please leave for now." "We've both lost enough friends," Mihaela said, and Tobias gritted his teeth before turning away. Surchax watched as Tobias stormed off, casting a hateful glance at Alastor, who just shrugged in response. Do I seem like an honest man? Did you expect me to stick my neck out for you? Your usefulness ran out the moment I realized the demon princes knew about this whole thing. Consider yourself thrown under the wagon, Alastor said, and Tobias visibly twitched in anger. Uncle, Mahala snapped, snapping Tobias back to reality. Go, Mahala said evenly. I suggest you go, little one. She is practically pleading for your life. You should know I'm running out of snacks, Surchak said, waving her last potato chip. Tobias gritted his teeth as he finally stormed away. Surchax laughed at the pathetic sight and grinned as Mahala rounded on her. Are you insane? Mahala hissed at Surchax. You know he isn't stable. Stop goading him, Mahala spat. Unlike you, we don't feel much of anything toward him. From where I'm sitting, you should have just killed him. Unstable and uncontrollable tools are not useful things, Rosa said from the side as Regari and Sina hid behind her. It's not that simple, Mahala retorted. It is, Surchak said simply, dusting off her hands after eating her last chip. Careful you don't compromise my lord's designs because of your sentimentality. Your timely arrival saved his life, Surchak said, her smile fading for a moment as her form shimmered, revealing a flash of the monster the Deep Shaper created. The old gods do not create kind servants. That is for the great beast to decide, whether he is useful or not. The great beast has shown some interest in him, and in all the members of my master's old group, Mahala said, and Surchax cracked a crooked smile. I wonder how much of that is just morbid and meaningless curiosity. Remember this well, Mahala. I know the old gods better than most, Surchax said with a wicked smile. Their blessings are never free. The more desperate you are, the more they will take. Dig. Oh. Oh, I like that guy. Angry, deranged, and above all, desperate. The desperate have no bargaining power. Those goat-like horns remind me a bit of the Ostaians. But then again, horns are the lineage of the demons. The Umberans also have horns. The only humanoids with horns are those who trace their lineage to the first demons. Furthermore, I recognize those cloven hooves. Only the most ancient of demons have bestial legs. The Ostaians had bestial traits, certainly, but they didn't have the same affinity for magic. They only kept their bestial forms because of their reliance on brute strength. As always with most forms of decay in this world, the most unnecessary ones go first. With most of the searing hells being giant slums, it's natural that the physical traits would decay first. But for a creature to have both, they must have been born before the decline. I might actually be able to infect this one with the mind-bore parasite as a term. Although it would be a hard sell, I'll admit. The Morningstar brand is proof of servitude. It would just be trading one master for another. The best I could do is offer a more lenient form of servitude. But judging by his reaction, he's not going to accept any more chains. Still, I really do like Mahala's attitude. She folded that fool like an omelette. It was amazing to watch. I wish I had some snacks like Surchax did. Might be a good idea to start up a movie industry or something. Huh. That's actually not a bad idea. But I suppose that's for another time. Mahala did mention she was the best duelist in the world. Technically, slaying a large monster isn't considered a duel. A duel is closer to two humanoids squaring off, so you could say she was in her element in that fight. A one-on-one duel is probably where she would shine. The Crowfather, on the other hand, seems to be a weaker duelist, but it seems he's far more capable in large-scale battles thanks to his magical proficiency. But one-on-one with someone like Mahala, the Crowfather would most likely lose his head in that scenario. As with the Hive, it is always important to use tools in the most effective way. That was the mistake of the old Firstborn. They squandered their tools and even let themselves be undone by their own creations. For all their strength, they couldn't imagine a world without them. That was their weakness, and I have no intention of following them into oblivion. I disconnected from the Hive in Hell and switched back to the Brood in Devonia. They were hard at work helping a group of people they were actively undermining. It was also great theatre, honestly. It was quite funny how things turned out. When I first showed up in this world, I thought I would run around and eat everything to get bigger, but it turns out that wasn't the best strategy. Now I'm just this shadowy puppet master pulling strings in the background, To its credit, it's really effective. I mean, just look at Devourer. Originally, I had plans for an all-out war with them, but now they're tearing themselves apart for me. Heck, even some of the merchant princes are thinking of switching sides to the Avalonian Empire. Merchants, at the end of the day, are pragmatists. There will be those who choose to back the winning side. Ego, how are your plans going? I asked into the hive mind. Very well, my king. I have quite the surprise for the Devonian crown. They are moving vast quantities of food from the Valley of Plenty. They're paying exorbitant prices, but it's either that or face collapse, Ego said. You want to target that supply line, I said, and I got a gleeful affirmative in response. The supply line goes through a mountain pass. There's a narrow choke point. The supplies can either go through this particular route or use the safer path, but that's clogged with desperate refugees, Ego said. If a caravan filled with food moves past starving refugees, they'll just rob it. So they have no choice but to take this alternative route. From what I see, it's also shorter but more dangerous because of the mountain cold. But the dangers can be addressed as long as you have resources. If that mountain pass is cut off, then the door to the valley will be closer, which means I can sell the food instead. I love money. But do you know what I love more than money? My enemies being poor. My king, do I have your permission to proceed? Ego asked, snapping me back to reality. Huh? Oh yeah, go ahead. Do the landslide thing you wanted. It's the only way you can permanently destroy the pass without revealing yourself. So yeah, get to it. Collapse away, I said, and Ego gave me another affirmative. Okay, on to the next thing. Sometimes I just feel like a bureaucrat. Dig. Third Prince Jakovich nodded grimly to his attendant as he read the latest news. An entire caravan filled with exorbitantly priced food had just been buried in a landslide, severing the last lifeline of food from the Valley of Plenty to the Devonian Empire. The harvest had completely failed. Corrupt officials, swayed by demons and their cults, had caused the entire farming industry to collapse. Outrageous taxes, severe punishments, like drawing and quartering for failure to pay, hadn't made the peasants contribute. Instead, it had driven them to run away. Some, in their spite, had even burned the granaries as they fled. The nobles, meanwhile, squandered their coin on gambling and women. Jakovich suspected Avalonian agents were involved, but he could prove nothing. In times of chaos and mismanagement, criminals always attempted to turn a profit. It was just that this all seemed too convenient. And now? The mountain pass was destroyed by a landslide. The week before, an investigator poised to flush out a cult had been murdered in his home. A month prior, a royal investigation team had vanished in the slums. An entire squad of royal guards, elite warriors capable of slaying demons, disappearing without a trace. It was all too suspicious. He had no choice. Tomorrow he would sail to the Isles of Gold and confer with the merchant princes. He planned to set up a temporary government on the eastern coast, far from the capital. It would be seen as treason, and he would surely be branded a traitor. But the arrangements were already in motion. The reserve army and the fragmented divisions were willing to defect. The officers and generals had already made up their minds. This was their last chance to save the Devonian Empire. Even many in the priesthood were on board, and word had already been sent ahead to the cities in the east. Still, food was the central problem. The merchant princes could help, but they would demand exorbitant prices. If his government survived in the short term, Jakovich hoped he could persuade them to lower prices for the sake of future goodwill. Perhaps, if he did his job well enough, he might even gain the sanction of the angels, a move that would curry further favor with the merchant princes, who, greedy as they were still loyal to high heaven. If everything fell into place, perhaps the current empire, so weak and rotted from within, wouldn't even be able to muster a force to prevent the secession. "Your wine, your highness," one of his maids said as she placed a cup on his desk. "Not wine, water. I will be awake for some time," Jakovich replied. The maid bowed and removed the wine, replacing it with water. He took a sip and noticed an unusually dry aftertaste. His throat felt parched, and he realized how engrossed he'd been in his work, neglecting even his own needs. He coughed, clearing his throat, and straightened his back as he glanced at the papers on his desk. There wasn't much time. Everything had to be perfect. Jakovich was the only legitimate heir who hadn't been charmed by the demons. His second brother had already been crucified by Archangel Silvana, and his two sisters had followed soon after. Silvana had warned the king and his eldest brother that if they didn't get a grip on the situation, they would be next. The only reason they had been spared was that they had no direct affiliations with demons. But Jakovich knew better. His brother and father were deep in bed with the cults. The only reason he hadn't turned them in was because he too had broken laws to fight them, even having corrupt priests killed for aiding the cults. Inquisitors had strung up thousands of souls and turned them into pyres. Jakovich had no doubt he would meet the same fate for his involvement if discovered. Children had been crucified for not reporting their parents, so mercy was out of the question. He coughed again, and this time he tasted blood. Looking down, he saw a splatter of red on his parchment. He touched his nose and saw blood on his fingers. His coughing grew more violent, the taste of iron overwhelming his senses as warm blood gushed from his mouth, staining his sleeves. Jakovich froze. The room began to swim around him, and as he looked up, he saw the twisted smiles of his attendants. They were watching him with delight. He glanced at the cup of water, his stomach sinking as he realized the truth. "Poison," he rasped, struggling to stand, but his legs refused to obey. He coughed again, blood pouring from his lips. His attendants were no longer human. Their forms had shifted into grotesque, eyeless creatures with wide, sinister smiles plastered across their faces. He tried to call for help, but the words wouldn't come. His body was shutting down, his limbs heavy, his breathing shallow, his vision narrowing. One of the creatures approached him and knelt down. "Hello, you can call me Ego," the creature said softly, its smile widening. "You had a good plan, but unfortunately I can't let you go through with it," Ego continued, watching Jakovich struggle to move. "Monster," Jakovich croaked, his voice barely a whisper as his strength ebbed away. His fingers twitched, but his body was already limp. His vision tunneled to darkness. The last thing he saw was Ego's satisfied grin. "My king will see your home rot. You will not interfere." Chapter 210, A New Path. Yael grimaced as he stared down at the corpse of the third prince. Guard duty was rarely glamorous, but this was rather morbid and also quite sad. When the news came down, Yael was sent to guard the body during the first shift. The reasons were that his commander, the Silver Maiden Vuria, said his family might want to visit, and there was also a tiny chance the assassins might try to tamper with the corpse. Yael glanced down at the corpse and felt this pang of pity. He guarded this body alongside the royal guard for an entire day, and not a single family member came to visit. Not his friends, not his allies in court, no one, just some soldiers tasked with guarding his corpse. He died alone, most likely poisoned by his close attendants. Yael glanced at the door and saw his replacement arrive. "Hey, Yael," Yael's close friend and training mate said as she approached. Like most cherubim, she had a small, petite body. Cherubim were about the same frame and size as adolescent humans. She had short blonde hair and amber eyes. "Hello, Alari," Yael greeted with a tired nod. "I'll take over. You get some rest," Alari said with a warm smile. Yael nodded gratefully at her before heading off. He left the palace and decided to head to the slums again. A bed was reserved for him in the cherubim militia outpost there, but he also had a bed available in the palace. But without being able to fly, if something were to happen in the slums, he would be exhausted from running all the way back. So despite his tiredness, he felt it would be best to rest at the outpost. As Yael walked down the once beautiful streets, he couldn't help but feel a pang of grief at the horrible sights around him. The streets were dilapidated, and many windows were broken from robberies. Most businesses had collapsed due to the ruined economy, and the food supply was falling to critical levels. Yael sensed a commotion nearby, and he saw what looked to be an old man being robbed. Yael was about to step in when he saw a pair of skinny teenagers ripping bread from the old man's hand. The old man didn't even resist, and when he offered his coin purse to the would-be thieves, they didn't even take it. They just ran off with the bread. It turns out money wasn't that useful when you couldn't buy food. Yael didn't have the heart to stop those teenagers. What was he to do? Save the man from starving just to let those two starve? There just wasn't enough food, so any shred of justice had no meaning. One way or another, someone was going to starve. Yael approached the old man, and he calmly stowed the coin purse back into his belt. "Hello, cherubim. I hope you can look the other way for those youngsters. It's not their fault they are starving," the old man said as he steadied himself on his gnarled wooden cane. It was then that Yael noticed that this old man carried himself with the poise of a seasoned soldier. He reminded Yael of the older instructors in the academy. They had the same poise and razor-sharp gaze. He had a head of pale blonde hair and bright blue eyes. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and wore a wide, billowing jacket-like robe over a set of simple cloth clothes. Yael noted that the jacket he wore was of the style of the Mugumans. It was called a haori, if he recalled correctly. It allowed freedom of movement while hiding anything on their person. These sights are quite common in recent days, what with the food shipment supply being lost in the landslide. Yael muttered in response, "Ah yes, I heard about that. At times it seems that fate itself is conspiring against this place," the old man said, as leaned more heavily against his cane. "Yes, it does seem like that, doesn't it?" Yael replied with a rather dark chuckle. "We just do what we can with what we have." Yael added with a small sigh, "Yes, that is the case in most things." The old man chuckled. "Do you need an escort back to your place of residence?" Yael asked in attempt to shift the gloomy topic. "No, I have survived this long. I will manage back to my tent in the slums." The old man replied with a gently and serene smile. "I'm heading back to the slums as well. We can head over together," Yael said with a smile, and the old man just responded with a grateful smile. The two headed out, and as they walked, Yael noted that the old man was surprisingly nimble for someone his age. The cane seemed more cosmetic rather than practical. "May I ask what you were doing before we met?" Yael asked as he glanced at the old man. "Fetching this," the old man said as he revealed a bag under his wide jacket, revealing a bag filled with bread. "I just offered them the remaining coins. I had spent the rest on bread," the old man said with a sly smile. "Who are you?" Yael asked as he glanced at the sack full of bread. This old man must have been carrying the bread around in his hands to act as a red herring. Robbers won't think he will have anything more if he offers the bread in his hands and his coin purse. They won't realize the real treasure is hidden under his cloak. "Just an old man. I do some favors for the Avalonian embassy, and they give me an allowance. I don't eat much, so I spend the rest on food for the children," the old man said as he covered up the sack of bread. "They must pay you quite well for you to afford that much bread. The price of food in the city has shot through of the roof," Yael commented. "Indeed, not surprising considering most of it has been stolen," the old man said. "Stolen?" Yael asked as he raised a brow at the old man. "Why, yes. Have you ever been in a city under siege?" the old man asked suddenly, and Yael did a small double-take and the sudden pivot in the conversation. "Can't say I have, sir," Yael replied. "Yes, I would imagine not." "Has heaven ever been under siege?" the old man asked. "Not to my knowledge," Yael replied as he tilted his head in confusion. "Well, young cherubim, in a siege there is shortage of food, which means it is not that much different from what is happening now. When food runs low, the nobles start selling their jewelry for food. As soon as things start getting bad, the thieves steal all the food and rob everyone blind with sky-high prices," the old man said with a laugh. "But surely the guards will step in," Yael responded. "Why would they? There isn't enough food to go around. The guards' rations get cut when food shortages begin. They also have families to feed, and with food prices skyrocketing, how will they feed them on their meager salary? Even the nobles are selling their priceless possessions. What hope does a guard have to feed his family?" the old man said as he glanced at a pair of guards who were idling by the side of the road. It was then that Yael noticed how well fed they were. They didn't have the gaunt, hungry expressions that plagued the citizens. "I must let my commander know of this. This cannot go on," Yael said as they turned a corner. "You can try, but honestly the guards are just the buyers and enforcers. The real ones behind this are the nobles who pay the guards. They are told to look the other way, and at the same time they buy from the criminal underworld," the old man said. Yael just sighed in response. "No need to lose heart, young one. Just do what you can," the old man said with a gentle smile. No, I'm not losing heart, Yael replied as he glanced at the old man. I just really hate talking to inquisitors. Inquisitors? The old man asked, his voice going slightly soft. Yes, the inquisitors have been looking for corrupt government members, Yael said as he scratched the back of his head. I'm going to have to report this, old man. Your words might just save a lot of the citizens. I just wish more would step forward, Yael said as they finally reached the edge of the slums. The burnings and crucifixions probably make people fearful to step forward, the old man commented as he glanced at a nearby scorched corpse atop a cross. Perhaps you are right, but corruption must be scoured from the world, Yael replied resolutely. I see. Well, it is time we part ways. I am sure the children are eager for the food, the old man said as he bid Yael farewell. Yael nodded and continued on his way. When he arrived at the command post, he noticed a group of wagons packed to the brim, filled with foodstuffs and even medical potions. He glanced up and saw them flying the banner of the White Phoenix. Yael approached and he saw his commanding officer, Militia Captain Andreas, ordering the nearby cherubim to get ready to unload the wagons. When Yael approached Captain Andreas, he turned to look at Yael. Ah, Yael, there you are. Come with me a moment, Captain Andreas said as he glanced at the command tent. Yael nodded in confusion before following after him towards the tent. As he walked, he saw the cherubim around him, giving out food to some of the starving people in the slum. When he entered the tent, he saw a group of 4 other cherubim. He recognized them to be other high-performing militia members. Yael nodded at each of them in turn, and getting the message, he stood in formation with the rest of them. Captain Andreas walked in front of the 5 of them and stared at them with a bored expression. Archangel Uriel has expressed appreciation for your unyielding dedication to high heaven. Given recent developments, the 5 of you will be given new responsibilities. In light of these new responsibilities, Archangel Uriel has determined that the 5 of you are no longer presentable in your current uniforms. Thus, Command has seen fit to grant you these as a reflection of your new rank, Captain Andreas said in a bored tone as he unceremoniously handed each of them a box. Yael tentatively opened the box and saw an epaulet bearing the stripes of a 3rd sergeant. Consider yourselves field promoted. Now the 4 of you, I need you to coordinate the distribution of the food rations given by our Avalonian acquaintances, Captain Andreas said begrudgingly. As for you, Yael, head over to the embassy. The ambassador is looking for you, Captain Andreas said as he turned away without even a salute. Dismissed, Captain Andreas droned as he walked out of the tent. So much for ceremony, one of the cherubim grumbled. Come on, let's go, Yael said as he turned and headed out of the tent. Yael would have preferred some sleep first, but alas, duty calls. He absent-mindedly fixed his epaulets to this uniform before heading towards the embassy. As he walked, he saw his fellow cherubim all doing their best to either unload the food or give it out. He noticed the boxes of food were filled with these strange brown bars. Out of curiosity, he approached a nearby wagon where he spotted an Avalonian soldier helping to unload some of the odd bars. Excuse me, good sir, may I know what those bars are? Yael asked as he shouted up at the soldier. The soldier paused as he looked down at Yael. The soldier's eyes glanced at his new rank and gave him a respectful salute. Greetings, Sergeant. I am Corporal Sully, the soldier said with a neat salute. Sergeant Yael, Yael said with a respectful salute. Never seen the ration bars before I take it? Corporal Sully asked amicably. No, we don't use these, Yael replied. Ah, makes sense. I bet you lot eat fancy. Corporal Sully said with a laugh. Not overly so, Yael replied with a smile of his own. Haha, well, these ration bars are a new thing the Empress came up with. Useful things, these bars. They don't go bad easily, and if you stick them someplace dry and cool, these things can last years, Corporal Sully said with a prideful grin. Oh, really? How long do they last exactly? Yael asked. Can't say. None of them have gone bad yet. The oldest bars we have are just over a year old. Really nifty things. They don't taste that good, but one bar is as good as a meal. Just chow down on a bar and drink a cup of water, and you can keep going for half a day, Corporal Sully replied. Really? Yael asked incredulously. Yep, We almost had famine a year ago. The Empress managed to avert it, but the danger is always there. So the great beast came up with this thing. It's really nutrient-rich, and 2 bars a day can keep a soldier going. From what I hear, we have enough bars to stave off 5 years of failed harvests, Corporal Sully said, and Yael's eyes widened at those words. Wow, Yael replied in surprise. Yeah, I hear we have entire underground storehouses of the stuff. The ambassador sent word to the capital with concerns for the people here, so the Empress sent a ship filled with supplies to help these poor souls out. Corporal Sully responded. That can't be cheap, Yael said as he furrowed his brow. No, it usually won't be. Yael heard a familiar voice say from behind him. He turned and saw Ambassador Zarkov standing there with his usual mild smile. Ambassador, greetings, Yael said with a salute. Good day to you too, Sergeant. Congratulations on your promotion, Zarkov said with a smile and nod. Thank you. I hear you wanted to speak with me, Yael said. Yes, but I think we have time for some casual conversation. I believe you and Corporal Sully here were in the middle of something, Zarkov said. Oh, it's nothing, Ambassador. Sergeant Yael here just wanted to know more about the ration bars, Corporal Sully said from atop the wagon. Yes, it would normally not be small sum given the market conditions. But I sent a letter to Her Grace the Empress with concerns for the good people in this city. In her benevolence and wisdom, she deigned to send a ship filled with supplies to aid the people here. From what I hear, the arrival of the ship, timely considering the recent landslide blocking access to food supplies, Zarkov said. Yes, it seems word got around, Yael replied with a sigh. Yes, the price of bread doubling does tend to raise a few eyebrows, Zarkov said with a bitter smile. That's very charitable of her, Yael said. Many refugees have started to trickle into the Empire. Their stories have not fallen on deaf ears. The collapse of the Devonian Empire would not profit the Avalonian Empire. Without prey, demons will simply find a new target. It's better to aid Devonia than to fight on home ground, wouldn't you agree? Zarkov said, and Yael furrowed his brows at those words. I would say then that you lack the proper reasons for aiding the people. Helping for your own personal self-interest is immoral, Yael said. Perhaps, but it is also prudent. A prudent ruler ensures a good life for its citizens. And there is also another reason, Zarkov said. Another reason? Yael asked. Perhaps the great beast himself could tell you.